Surely this will work.
Yeah.
It's going to work. It's going to work. We have an excellent connection. We have an excellent connection, but we're not showing anything. All right, I think we're locked in.
Exactly. It's terrible.
So I'm trying out this new thing. It's called dinner. And so on Thursday night, I started eating dinner at the beginning of class, because that's like when I had time to eat dinner.
Right.
And at 8 o'clock, I finished eating dinner.
Right.
Which means, do I usually talk too fast?
I don't know if it's.
I don't know, you've only had me for one class. You have no idea what I do, right?
I don't know if
You
it's
talk fast, but it works for me.
Well, if it worked for... shoot, what was the fake name you were going by? Are you like Isabel or something?
Grayson.
Grayson?
That's my sister.
I don't know if it's that you talk too fast, you just don't breathe a lot while you're talking.
Oh my gosh, I'm always like...
Breathing loud.
My heart rate just increases over time to try and keep up.
Yeah. And I think you just you don't take breaths in between sentences. So you're not actually talking fast, you're just not taking the time to breathe.
I wonder if that's a metaphor. How come every screen except these two is working?
Because
I didn't even know they weren't working. I was looking at 3 that work.
we'll all just turn around and face away from you while you lecture behind us. The way class was designed to happen.
Cool. All right, so where's Discord? I love Microsoft Windows because it took that long to find a program on my computer. So I'm pretty sure last time we were here, which was like a million years ago, right? I was like, the next homework is due Monday, January 27th, right? And then that's like not enough information, right? Because that is a range of 47 hours, right? And so I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, I bet I meant January 27th anywhere on Earth, right? Which is like current time anywhere on Earth. What time is it now? So it's 2:04 p.m. somewhere on Earth. And then I looked at the slides for today, and they started with, let's talk about the homework at the beginning of class. But those things aren't contraindicated, right? Because it makes sense to talk about the homework so you know what you need to turn in, you feel good about GitHub Pages, which I am going to make you learn. Because if I don't do it now, Professor Jed Rembold is going to make you learn it this summer. And maybe that's good or bad. I don't know. So my line of thinking is, if you just go quickly through some of the first slides here, right? There's a 30-minute group exercise, and then there's a little bit of instructional content. And before we get to that 30-minute group exercise, I think that should flow naturally out of us discussing homework 1 with each other. The way I was envisioning doing this that I think is the best for our learning is that I suspect there's going to be 2 to 3 different types of questions on homework 1. Some of them will be, Calvin, how do I do machine learning? And you can talk to each other about that, and also to me. Some of them will be, Calvin, how do I do GitHub Pages? Which some of you will be able to talk to each other about that, and some of you will have to talk to me. And then the last one will be, what about all those ethics questions at the end? And you can only talk to Jacob for those. You cannot speak to anyone else about those. If you talk to me about ethics, I'll be like, what? I haven't heard of that word before. It rhymes with graphics. So I think that this is a think, pair, share angle on homework 1. And I would specifically like you to raise your hand if you're nervous about getting something turned in correctly. I expected to get a dizzying flurry of emails, like while I was driving down here not checking my phone to see if they were happening. So I don't know. I don't know if you all turned in the homework 5 minutes before class, right? And I'm also not super opinionated on that. To me, it is much more interesting to make sure you feel good about doing some of your technical writing, typesetting it in a Quarto document, getting it out there somewhere you can link it from LinkedIn, having a portfolio document, and being able to share that with people when you go into a job interview. I have pulled up things I've written in job interviews that were on the public web before, and it like blows everyone. They're like, oh, that's so cool, right? So I would like you to know how to do that. So find a partner and show that person where your homework 1 is, if that person has finished homework 1. And if not, talk to that person about how you would get homework 1 onto wherever it is that you're sharing it from. Does that make sense? This is a scientific communication setting. Okay, I don't want to do too long on this. I want to do 15 minutes and I want to get into the exercise. But at the end of this 15 minutes, you should have your R and or Python installation rearing to go, right? Because we're going to do a feature engineering project. And we want to make sure we're doing things that make sense about that. I have 9 Discord messages. Are those all from you? Did someone send me a Discord message? That's Jacob, isn't it? They're all about ethics. Okay, so let me pull up the homework so it's on the screen so we're all looking at the same thing. And I will say a few motivating marks about it, and then we'll get into it. Okay, so I set this up the way I would set something up that I send to like one of my colleagues in the math department who I'm not necessarily trying to impress, but I don't want them to think I'm a silly goose, right? So I have a title. I'll put my name on it so they know it's from me. Usually I'd put my email on something like this. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Publication dates are unusual to me. I did that because this is a homework assignment, right? And so I think that should say 12 p.m. anywhere on Earth, right? I think you should include an abstract, and I think this abstract is fine, but you should also link directly to the Quarto Markdown document. Why is that? Now, I have read a certain number of these documents over the years when I'm trying to learn to do something almost invariably in scikit-learn, which is impossible to learn unless I teach it to you, so buckle up. And very frequently I find things that look really, really good and I don't have the source code for, and I either have to make them again myself or give up. And both of those things are bad. There is one extremely good electrical engineering professor that teaches at IIT Bombay in India, and I love that person's slides, and they're all closed source, so I can't use any of them if there's one thing wrong with them, right? And I have to pretend my name is something I can't pronounce. I don't remember what this person's name is, which is too bad because I should be giving a citation, right? Very good cryptography researcher. Okay. You're supposed to delete this line, and probably this line. See how it says delete this line? Yeah, okay. So this is only supposed to say setup, and then you're supposed to set up the code and then describe it, right? I'm using this technique here, where I'm grabbing things from a URL. What is one reason to do that? So if I email someone this Quarto Markdown document and say, hey, check this out, they can just run it without having to figure out where wine.rds is, right? I don't think you were all in love with doing it that way. I am. I got this to work in Posit Cloud. I got this to work in a variety of settings. There's like 8 of them, and I don't remember which ones I tried, but like 4 of them worked, and I didn't try the other ones. Hopefully all of the to-dos make sense to you. And I have articulated, and I hope that this is compelling to you, that to me it made more sense to give you an example of what this should look like when you're done that isn't all the way filled in than have very, very precise instructions at the 500 level. And so then there's a series of writing. Ta-da! I think that this would be a cool looking assignment. This is something I would share with my friends. I'm eager to see what you would all have. I'm going to count down and then you're going to start talking to each other and have a productive time. 3, 2, 1, go!
Like actual,
About what?
about the ethics section.
Oh, great.
Because there are 2 questions that I do not understand what they meant, so I could not answer them. I wasn't asking Tanner to like actually like.
Or both of them.
Why is I don't understand.
Please clock start. Please clock start. Clock please start. Please clock please start. Get started? No. Ah, that's not what I want at all. I'm gonna have to use the browser for a timer. That's embarrassing.
So that was okay. So that's
Okay. Cool. Cool, cool, cool.
I guess my thing was just like understanding this exactly what or have been talking about. Oh, that is.
This is so good.
Okay, it's only about the one.
And Thomas, you're not talking to someone else. What are you doing? You're breaking the rules. Yeah.
And then accuracy.
I didn't. Like for this?
Yeah, the accuracy of like, you know, use strictly statistics to justify your answer.
Oh, very bad.
Oh, yeah. I was just trying to.
Yes. I had one question on ethics. I was debating with another.
I mean,
I just said like the baseline accuracy because the baseline is like 70.
yeah, I think that's fine.
It doesn't work. Oh, yeah.
Like put your username and then make an index
But this is my. I just have
whatever okay, cool. And then you can data sets in order to put it.
Well, you technically have 10 more hours.
I'm just using
Honestly, I finished it on the 19th. I was scared of everything line for all of the lectures.
There is like more like
There's still and then I went back to the first, so I had to use yeah, I realized that was wrong after I submitted it. So I just took out the instructions and replaced it with my explanation. I don't have a camera, right? I don't know where the questions go.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have that.
there was one that I forgot. I sometimes posted them, so I ended up
actually use jar and flat.
Who cares? I actually did it. And I forgot to ask him.
You have the, you know, problem.
He put a link in there, and it's just like, and so I still have access to type stuff.
great.
So I don't know how I did it, but I replaced it.
some support. I got them.
Yeah, I know.
So it's on there.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah, so like.
I don't know if it's important to understand what like
I don't know how it
like I think it's just important to understand that it's lower
I watched that the other day.
and it's higher. And I think that's the end of the pretty
Thinking of
If you're trying to like upload your files, like in a just a
and then like if every
Yeah, a lot of them look really, they look
Oh yes, that's what words.
I don't know, he's the success.
So he's trying to force.
Yeah. Yes.
Anywhere other thing actually.
Okay. Did you put yours on GitHub?
Okay, cool. So I'll just.
Did you put yours on GitHub page?
That's
Okay.
why when
I see.
I
Right.
got this far,
So you have a repository, right?
allegedly.
Well, you're in the process of creating a private repository. That's what this page is. So I can't remember. Probably, yeah. I think generally I make them public unless someone tells me to make them. Because usually on the public it's like easier to do actual I think they maybe will, but you have to like give them it's rather name it whatever you want it to be named. I mean, I think you could just name it. There was I think they wanted us to name it. Well, they created it on GitHub.
Don't have to worry about me, it's not we ever use.
They named theirs Python stack block, but I don't. I think that you could just name it like Data 505 or something. So this was from their like yeah.
Every time we go on
So I think you could just name it like Data 505 Yeah, so like the way GitHub Pages is like a website, and I'm pretty sure it's what we want to do is we're going to create a Porto book that is all of our homework assignments. I think that's what it's for. Maybe I can ask you about it. But yeah. If you want, I can just I'll make a repository. You would think
I used to like last year. Am I doing that? Am I doing something else? Yeah.
And then once you like have a repository,
They were very, very similar. Like my RMS, they're like 0.4687 and then 0.685. And then I explained it, and then the next, I think it was interaction.
I made mine.
Yeah, like this interaction between.
Well, like in theory, you want it to like if you make it look nice, and then it's also
By
then
each
you
province.
wow.
Oh, and then gives you.
Yeah.
But I just was I just
I remember I had to go very step by step, and I was like,
So now you're here and you
like what each number meant, and then it was like.
But the way you do pages is setting.
Well, I was just like, what? Like I would get this table, I'm like, okay, cool, I got it, but like then I was thinking about for example what each number meant, and so it was.
And then you like select like which branches. So probably for us that's like all.
If you do, so you're in the interaction between the points that are by province, so if you use this. Yeah, so you do the plus is like an interaction with the main something.
Yeah.
There's interaction in the main, whereas province is just the interaction. So if you take the points of the so it's the interaction of those plus the whatever it's called, and then the interaction of this value times province is each province without that going on the symbol. So that's yeah. So then it gives you like.
And then
So it gets a little complicated, but yeah, so it's like cherry province, New York cherry province.
This like new year, I
Estimate of the price
knew
for
a good challenge was not to use it. It was like a promise of
oh, that makes sense. Like we have to have code. Yeah, like if you uploaded your
Huh? Yeah, the same.
I think it's only showing me the top 7 though.
Is this something?
I think they're literature. I might know it's I thought I saw that it was just like this is the yeah.
for a month.
Yeah, there was an example.
Go back to settings.
In the slides, but I took
And that now.
That part's like poison.
Yeah, there should be like after you select that, there should be a thing that's like,
Yeah, when you're friendly, when I says like you can't find your cursor on the shape of the history. And you'll work it. You'll always yeah, that's I know what I did.
intriguing. Because you should just be able to like build from branch and then choose the main one.
They're better. Yeah.
Oh, great. Your site applies. Visit site. Well, that sucks. It might be because this needs, we also need your like HTML.
Oh, like
Because websites are also like HTML.
If I do a full length day, my length are out of the week. So never do it. We have 2 left on Tuesdays that are legs, and it's not really, it's just a lot of work. So it's like, I can't do a full leg day with that. So take matches and
Are you all over to
that's crazy. Like
Yeah, I tried it last week.
Science fiction.
I'm not
I'm
doing
trying.
it.
So
Not only
the
do
goal
they-
that we
like,
have,
like,
GitHub pages like is a Quarto book of all of our courses. Right.
I used to try to break them up, but with like all these books that were
Well, that's my other goal.
No. Okay. I finished this thing and I was like, that number is hard.
for the conversation. She liked it today.
Oh, yeah.
She asked me about it.
Are we
I know, I was like, oh, what? She's like,
Yeah, they don't need
still, like, you know how much jump?
Uh-oh, we're out of seconds.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, back, the next thing we do is gonna be,
Just restart it. It works all the time.
okay.
Ba-ba-da-da! Okay, it is 6:27, perfect. Okay. So, review of homework 1. My vision for you is that on LinkedIn, there's all of these people that run like their local R user group. And all of them are working on a Quarto book at any given time. And they put like the cool stuff they do in it, and then they like link to it every time someone has a question. And they like get a bunch of traffic on their page, and they have a high Google page rank, and if you Google them or their name, even if they have a common name, they're at the top of the Google search results, right? These are all performance benefits to you no matter what you want to do. So some of you may want to like look for work someday, some of you may want to like run for office someday, some of you may like want to give a speech at a community organization or something like that. For all of these, it is beneficial to have a public profile that can, for example, be under an assumed name or not actually directly related to who you really are if you want to protect your privacy, right? There's all these different angles. You can do this internally on intranets at larger companies, right? I have heard that the NIH has begun accepting data as our markdown documents that are rendered in Quarto as an alternative to the old SAS. So this is something that's used internally for privileged communication about potentially very sensitive information, right? It is just a good way to move information around, and I would like you to be familiar with how to do that and some of the technologies that enable us to do that. All of you have pulled data sources off of GitHub before, right? We understand that it is ubiquitous. We understand that also things like Kaggle and so on are ubiquitous, right? GitHub has probably 85% of the world's code on it, right? So they have a monopoly, which is great in some ways. Okay, here are the packages I am using today. This is fewer packages than last time, but I am adding one package today, which is called Fast Dummies. It looks like Fast Dummies is not as much in use as it was perhaps in 21 when these slides were first put together. I got it to work pretty well, but if you see some goofy stuff with it, there's probably some like just older methods around. Those older methods will persist in source code you find online, documentation you read in various sources. Probably older versions of the LLMs will have that stuff, yada, yada, yada. Don't worry about it too much. It worked just fine for me. Okay, so tidyverse, caret. Should we pronounce it caret? We've got the caret package. We've got the Fast Dummies package, and then I use thematic just to make my slides look nicer. In the sort of broad typesetting tertiary learning objective, which is something I've grown increasingly passionate about over time when I realized I trust things if they look good, which is not a good cognitive bias to have, right? I think there's this story about it called Paradise Lost. Any literature appreciators? Has anyone in here read Paradise Lost? Me neither. That's crazy. Okay. I watched Nosferatu this weekend, and I was like, I haven't read Dracula. I don't know if this is correct. Sure seems wrong. Okay, right. I don't know why I started that tangent. Okay.
Okay.
So, blah, blah, blah. We grab wine RDS. You can grab wine RDS however you want. I do, in fact, download a new copy every time I use it. I don't care. Bits are free. It's 2025, right? My impression is the majority of the time it takes to load that is actually getting it packaged up into your current R environment, and actually downloading it takes a very, very small percentage of the time to use it. So I have just kept using it from a URL for that reason. If you are ever running into performance problems, which we will at one point tonight if I'm remembering correctly, I'll just take a sample from this thing. This is not a performance engineering class, right? If you want to do performance engineering, do not talk to me because I will not stop talking about it. You'll start something you can't finish, right? So if you're running into performance problems in this house, my recommendation is just cut the data set, get the actual tools working, and then come back and we'll figure out the performance later, right? And usually the way the performance will be figured out is you throw it on a cloud server somewhere and don't think about it until it's done. And that is a completely reasonable way to solve problems. This is the wine database, which you've all seen before, and it has this many entries in it. That is 130,000. How many of those wines scored 80 points exactly? I still haven't checked either. I think it's interesting none of us have checked yet. Just keep that in mind, right? Okay. Does anyone have an opinion about what the term feature engineering means that you would like to share with the class? It's a big class. You'd have to be pretty brave, but I'd respect you a lot if you do it. Okay, I'm not going to follow up by saying I don't respect any of you, which is the exact negation of what I said, right? So I do still respect you even though you didn't speak up, and I want to be clear about that. So I think of engineering as a way of solving problems. Computer science is something I often talk about as the science of solving problems. Engineering is perhaps a combination of methods for solving problems. And the combination of methods we use are here in a data science field specific to the notion of features. We introduced features as a relevant vocabulary word last class, and I'm expecting you have heard this in your other data classes as well, right? A feature is a variable over which we are trying to predict some outcome or some expectation, right? So we have a series of variables and we want to solve some problem they are having. And usually the problem they're having is our features are representing some data or representing data in some way other than which we want to study it. And we've seen this most prominently with things like price, which frequently we care about the log of price. We've seen this with things like province, where frequently we do not care which province wine comes from, but we care whether it comes from a specific province. So we are going to apply a series of data transposes before we get in too far to our machine learning workloads, because when we start turning on the machine learning problems, we want to be studying the things we care about. And the things we care about we are going to have to express with data transposes over data frames, usually with R language mutate or with Python language apply. So with that motivation, I want you to look into this interesting idea. Identify 3 interesting features of the wine data set. Now that's a little bit too easy, so we've thrown you a loop here. I claim there exists a critic named Roger Voss. And I claim also that relative to other critics, there exists a wine varietal, which is one of the things that we can measure about wine. We can measure its price, the province from which it hails, the critic which evaluated that wine, and we can also measure the varietal, the subspecies of grape that wine was generated from. There exists some wine varietal which Voss scores lower than you would expect compared to other critics. So there's a comparison here. And I want to know what that varietal is, and I do not want you to press the next button, because then you'll be spoiled. So there's a spoiler alert for going on. By the way, if you're spoiled anyways, this will not be that easy to solve. So if you need to lower the difficulty in order to accomplish your goals, go ahead and do that. Spoil yourself and then figure out how to look. But you can also look without spoiling yourself. So form groups. You should form a group different than the one you worked with previously, unless you have a good reason to work with that same person, because I would like you all to know each other. And so I'm going to say ready, go, and then I'm going to start a 30-minute timer. Please talk to someone new. Ready, go. Oh no, I closed the timer. Oh, I can start it again.
No, I'm going to do that every time.
Oh no, someone's eating all of my hummus. No, no, no.
Yeah, one of these days I'll get to it.
Anytime I put math and values are not allowed in this context for line or column alone.
Yeah, I got that.
Filter.
No idea what that means. I have a line 4, but even when I get rid of this, it still goes I added it.
Okay, great. I was unclear.
It was like title it.
I was like, there is no title. I'm confused. So, right?
Which am I I'm just trying to
Yes. Probably
Yes, I think like 2 years I don't know if it's about the first It's a one way to do that.
that would be the
What about here ourselves?
We're the people that
So then it sounds like we make it put on the internet for other people to then say, don't believe it.
We want to be part of the problem.
I really hope that they didn't like mess with the cases. That would just be
like in our
That's true.
I didn't know if my computer was going to work with me on GitHub or not, so I was.
Just like that?
It did work.
Oh, yeah. What do we consider a trusting teacher?
Oh, yeah. Other types.
I was like, why is this look so small? I just copied it.
I don't know what's in there.
Yeah, that's work.
You're banned.
Should I just put that? Are we just trying to figure out like reading areas? Okay. Maybe I'll make a little graph and see.
I just opened the file. What are you trying to do? Well, all of the slides, there's code. Like on the website, like here, there's code. No, we solved the problem.
Oh, wait, you got it.
You just like make models and people just say something like, oh, that's a good picture.
Since we had the other class.
Sometimes it's just
Not enough yet.
What are we classifying as interesting?
what's the one graph? Lollipop graph. Trying to make like, it's like a stick that has a range from the minimum to the max, and then it has
The problem is that I'm not great at it, so I need people exactly what they're recording.
but I have to go figure out what the minimum is. I think it literally might be one.
I love EDA. I'm just also just like obsessive, and so now I'm like, I want this thing to be fixed so I can put it on the and not work on it.
I love the goal. I love the progressive section.
I didn't realize if I downloaded the code without the slide update, it would be fast. Well, you know, interesting.
Yeah, I think right.
Yeah, no, I put the arrow, it opens it. Here we go.
Did it change anything next time?
No, I got the same error. Okay, I found it.
That's so strange.
I had to find it. Because I knew it was right there. Like, I didn't know what it was. But I was like, I can't find the file on my computer to get upload to get it.
Yeah, it's very slow.
You know what? Me too, girl.
That's
I hate this.
that looks terrible, but it is kind of what you want.
I don't want my name attached. I'm looking at this right now.
I'm currently just of the mind of like, I'm just gonna put things.
It shouldn't be as ugly as it is. Like, it should look like this, which is not much better. But like,
I can't believe
Oh my god. There's 639
well, but like, I don't know what I think is the union.
Okay, wait.
I didn't do that.
We won't look at it.
That's the goal.
How this works.
Also like a joke, not I'm like those like cool. Should I change my pirates? We don't have to hear that as well. Geo
My favorite.
Stop making me cry.
I'm sorry.
So,
Okay,
someone
there's
goes on
fantastic
and
news today. This company
doesn't
$2
want.
billion because they found out LLMs are fake. Which I've been saying nonstop.
I wonder what happened in
For 18 months.
2001.
They're like, I don't think a bunch of trillionaires are right. I was like, why?
When all the trillionaires are 8 years old and you don't know how Siri works,
We haven't seen as high ratings since 1995, but that might be because,
I can take it.
well, exactly, it was so many people
Well,
are
me and
taking
Dakota.
it from 1995, plus these are ancient ones.
I don't care.
If people are trying to more recent.
See, I went through you on not for smarts, but to just like
It
guess.
sounds like a great game for people to make.
It seems like it
I want to see if
would.
there's these.
Like a little bit.
That's what I want to know.
But then if you look, they also, it also pops out.
Okay. Not even close to the thing I do.
If you like it, because it's open source and it's like one web engine.
right now.
Like on data stack.
Well, it's like 1% consuming
Just check my data science.
It's
Came out and
I want, all my kids are from house. And then maybe
Why? Why? So it's like,
I love the dogs. That's like a really dumb thing to be like, why do you go to the
yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because they do.
I've already, so I actually have a panic attack in linear algebra, and right now I'm currently gonna go to prison.
Yeah.
I got a tattoo like 2 days ago.
It's bad. Just to say, I got that little semester already where I'm like, okay, it's time for a new piercing, a new tattoo, like, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to.
Let's dye the hair again.
Trying to build so I can get more action.
Like, my hair's healthy enough. It's fine. It's been a couple months. I can fry it.
Yeah. That's just to go through your eyes and just get it
But you
like
know,
that.
it's not impossible.
Right, but it sounds
Recent.
No, it sounds so
Recent.
Quite fly, curly hair might surprise you. Because my curly hair has
Something that's not
unkept
a
locks.
yeah.
server thing.
Especially considering.
So probably just like,
The ends of my hair are not
so you basically have to.
I got a little
Yeah, I'm like,
What is
I'm
my
gonna get it
favorite
all.
ones today?
What else?
Kind of rocking it.
My job.
Yeah, but no, clearly not. Well, you know, sorry. We have all trying to figure out whose fault it is, but we can't. I think so. We should. We really should, because I have some words. Very lame.
All I did was, oh, man.
Yeah, I know some girls
It's right.
it's the same. Like the time that so once they start to get to like.
It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. And then like, we're guys in circles. So I would say, on average, he was the lowest. The spread average. So that's what I went based on. I don't know if that's. Very
Oh, I think it's because the shots last year.
Just like when we spent.
I know it's not.
Diacom is like, yeah, you
But it sounds like it should be. I got irrationally angry over seeing somewhere where it's like,
only up to Gen
it's
6.
only up to Gen 6.
Yeah, they're like
And-
sticking with water types now. Oh my god.
And the fact that Mega Charizard is still for Gen 1 because they're like, oh, Charizard is Gen 1, and like,
Wait, so they had your X number column and the Gen column and you did separately? That's good. I'm glad I was able to see and haven't done
Yeah, so it was better. We were just testing something a second ago. Yeah, we were
depends if you want to be as crazy about it as I was.
I'm telling you right now.
It would probably, like, be probably that.
How long did
Oh my god.
But I did
It's like marginally more complex.
I know exactly. I always said I hate
Mega Venusaur says.
Well, we thought that, and then we realized it's just such a small sample.
Exactly. Like, the second I started with Mega Venusaur, and you said it was in Gen 1, I was like, that's
the bonus one.
That's not right. That's not right.
Oh, and it's.
But I'm only 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2005, I guess I was like over 1,000.
And there's just the wide variety.
Maybe we'll
Your
have
house
I'm sitting here and I'm like, nobody else is using that.
honestly, I just saw like the 2,500 mark. Not like dumpster
I've been great items as well,
Oh, like screens and stuff?
Right there.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I
That was an example of a bad thing to do.
What? Well, I want to see if there's any difference. I can't see if there's any difference.
Who's the one who likes the most? It's only down here.
But I heard that class was like
The legendary Gen class. I
Yeah.
loved that class. It was, I did so many games.
Oh, yeah, that was
No, you're good. I think it's two times.
I did take that class.
All I did was bonus.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah. That was one. So, we divided the constants.
That was
Because there was one time or it didn't work to my standard. I'm sitting there and I'm like, look, I need it.
Yeah. Wrong.
Like, I have several very big scholarships, so I am quite over the top of my grades. And I'm like, without my scholarships, I can't afford to go here. So please, lucky God, don't fuck up my grades. There's a lot of is it good energy, or is it just energy? See, I was PMS with so I was sorry.
Yeah.
God, that also made me sound but you want to know the best thing about that day? I got to have that high it was pretty good. Mission success.
Yeah, I have my other one. I got it when my daughter was born. So it's about 10 years old now.
You gotta have something. Yeah.
It's great in junior too. Because I was able to, because scraper. My friend was like, forever you scrape I was like, I also have to she goes, oh, I
Before final. Have you guys seen the video where you're watching on the wooden table and you like mix up all the volcanoes, all the onions to do the volcano?
That's still not my favorite. Yeah.
We're a whole emotional labor. They're actually
Yeah, no.
they're over there
Great work, man. So I just assume you're doing amazing work.
All the wine we should consider. Why would I mention
Pretty normal.
yeah, and we'll let it out with
Wow.
That's so rich.
The guy in the pink shirt is trying to skip.
No, there's a lot of emotions going on over here.
Oh, you're good. I have a lot of emotions about work right now, so I get it.
Well, I don't know how to say it. We're so grand right now.
My what's my name? So, everybody else was offered a position, another position. I was offered severance. And I'm like, it's also harder because I'm insistent. So, managers get treated a little bit different. This is forced to
That did nothing.
Everyone else gets a pension bonus. I was offered like 10 times the rate that we're
Not home run.
You know why? Because I sent you the chest price.
never mind.
Because it's from the homework and I never changed it. No, I literally just said, "Right, close it up."
Not all time. And they're not important. I'm gonna go look at it. Okay.
Hooray. That's a
Are you stealing my work? Just trying to figure out what it is. Oh, well, that's good.
Would you have eaten it if it was edible?
I think I could get away with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've already stolen my keys.
Yeah, my arm's been a lot of trying not to because I'm trying to go down.
Still did nothing.
So it's like, well, that's a sleep. I'm looking within Dayton still for branch manager jobs. So currently I'm assistant branch manager, but I've got 40. But I mean,
Oh, is that a...
the hardest part for me is if somebody that applies and has a bunch of experience, and then they go, oh, it's like, and then that person gets it, and then they wind up.
That thing. Oh, that was, I can't feel
And
it.
then
Okay,
they go,
that's
wow.
what it was.
That
That was like that.
or something.
Because it's... I took medication, but
It's a fake class. You learned real math, we learned real math.
I guess it does give us a little
Okay,
bit
but
more.
that's more math than we learned.
That's funny. Like the bottom
Okay,
set,
maybe
it's like
we
three cavern
throw out a line check. Maybe we feel
Oh no! Oh no! It says 0 seconds.
It didn't make a sound.
That's how much seconds I have left after finishing my delicious dinner of pita bread. I'm usually not this excited about dinner. It was just really good today. Fun fact, my dinner was topped with olive oil, which I think grows in many of the same climatological regions as grapes. So you could do this on an olive oil data set. And where's the #1 ranked olive oil in the United States grown? At Durant Farms, in between McMinnville and Newburgh, because it does really well in colder climates, according to the tasters at the festivals in Japan and Manhattan. And what do they know about Oregon, right? Nothing. But we like W's, so shout out Durant. Okay. So, I'm supposed to teach you a little bit about different types of variables. We basically have like 24 slides until dinner, so there's going to be one more exercise. This is an exercise-heavy night, and I hope that works well for you. It works well for me. But we're building up towards getting into some of these machine learning applications, right? So, one of the things to take away from this VOS discussion is that you can't really plot critics of wine or provinces of wine or varietals of wine on a continuum. You can, in fact, do this with points. The points are, in fact, categories, right? Because there's exactly 21 of them, if I'm not mistaken, 80 to 100 inclusive. But we could imagine that we're actually just taking observations over some continuous continuum, I guess. I don't know what word I was looking for there. So I regard both prices and points as basically continuous. I am sampling from a distribution where there is any possible number of entries. I can think of these as real numbers, so there could be decimal points, and I think of them as sort of monotonically increasing. I can tell from any two measurements which one is higher or lower than the other, right? Critics are very different from this, right? There's no ordering of critics. There's not necessarily any distance between different critics, right? If a new critic were to spawn into being and start reviewing wine, I wouldn't necessarily know where to place them. We can, in fact, sort critics by things like their name, right? But that's not an interesting way to sort them, right? And in fact, we could treat the possibilities of names as a continuous variable, right? But that isn't particularly helpful to do. One reason to visualize the data before modeling it is some interesting results I've seen coming out of vision science, which I think there's not really a strong intuitive sense of what it means for two things to be correlated. I have been very intrigued over the years. I expected this to change when computers got more powerful. The dominance of the least squares line is interesting to me because that feels like an unbelievably hand-fisted approach that was designed to be done by people before calculators were invented, right? And no one has come up with a better thing yet. And it's very, very easy to visualize. It's very easy to look at a line and draw squares. If I walk over to this whiteboard here, right, and I draw some axes, and I put some points on the axes, and I draw a line, it's just a little bit too easy to visualize this, right? And these are supposed to be squares, but, you know, whatever. I'm not very good at drawing squares. This visual understanding seems much more like the entry-level way, the default way, the built-in way that human minds like to understand data, compared to, for example, looking at the lines of a CSV or looking at the visualization of a data frame in something like RStudio, right? So
my impression is when you visualize data, you are much more likely to understand it. It is possible that Professor Heather Katatta-Smalley has already persuaded you of this. I think this is especially important when we are rapidly iterating with machine learning. It is my impression that if there were strong visualizations about what was going on inside of the transformer models that underpin the large language models, no one would regard them as impressive. They are simply picking the most likely word that is expected to come after a sequence of prior words, right? That is not academically interesting. It is not algorithmically interesting. It does not mean you are having a conversation with something with ideas. It does not mean that they are more or less likely to be correct than random guessing. However, it means they are extremely likely, because of what they are trying to do, to seem like they are doing better than random guessing, right? If we could visualize the graph of which word you expected to be next to coming out of an LLM, we would find them unbelievably unimpressive. But there is no great way to visualize words, so they seem impressive to us, right? Always look at your data before modeling it. You are almost always going to be looking at data that you should take a log of. I think more than half the time I am looking at a numerical variable, I take a log of it. More than half the time I'm looking at a categorical variable, I perform a transpose like a mutate on it, right? I very rarely care about the combination. Here is one way to look at the Voss-Pinot system, or I guess I should say Voss-Pinot-Gris system, because there's more than one Pinot. Generally speaking, Voss scores higher wines for which Pinot Gris is false compared to the baseline. In general, Pinots perform slightly better than other wines, and for Voss they score worse. Something that shocked me about this data when I looked at it is we should always label our axes. I'm sure we're familiar with that. Look how narrow these ranges are. That's just a couple hundredths. Who cares? I didn't check to see if this was statistically significant. I question whether it is. This looks like it is small enough to be a measurement error to me. It is also entirely likely that Voss happens to review Pinots in a region where Pinot Gris is a weak grape, and that this would not be anomalous in, I think, Burgundy, where I believe Voss is active. So, well, there does exist a varietal for which Robert Voss scores that varietal lower than you would expect, all other things being equal. It is a fairly small difference. That is fewer than, what, 1% of the range of scores, right? And it is from a very narrow subset of wines, a small number of years, a small number of regions, a small scoring range, right? I think these wines are quite a bit above average in general. I am curious to know what you all found about that. I think I got to talk to some of you all a little bit, but if you have some ideas, I would love for you to put them in the Discord with some scripts so I can see what you found. Because I'm interested in this question. I find it quite engaging. I am pretty interested in whether wine is increasing in value in Oregon over time. Why is that? So I have the uncommon misfortune of being a university professor, which means that my future is tied to the performance of the region as a whole. What this means is I'm very interested in things that help the region as a whole, like, for example, environmental engineering around wine regions. This is why I care so much about olive oil. I also happen to care a lot about apples, right? Oregon has a relatively non-diversified economy. It makes Daimler trucks, semiconductors, overpriced shoes that are getting stolen more and more every year, and very, very good fruit, right? Fruit is going to be a load-bearing pillar of the Oregon economy for the next 40 years, and it is the most directly impacted by anthropogenic climate change. So I was really hoping when I graphed this, I was going to see that line going up and to the right. And it appears to have flattened out after 2008, which is not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see that line going way up. I do suspect since 2015, this line is going up. The wineries in this region that I am aware of, many of them have collected their best scores in the past 10 years. I think that The APIs that this data set was gathered over have been taken offline by the same people causing the anthropogenic climate change. So I don't know that we're going to get markedly better data than this over time. But I am really optimistic for a region. I have been so impressed since moving out here by some of the fruit I've tried that seems dramatically better than other fruit I've had in the country. I moved here from North Carolina, which is a famous tomato region, and in fact, the tomatoes and peppers are better there. I've had apples all over the country, and the apples here are like nothing else. Cider is a very durable market because it's gluten-free. And so that's been doing very well. That's holding up a region, and I think wine is going to do that as well. I don't think we can sell shoes forever. We'll find out. So, in the interests of serving our region, we have our last exercise before we go on break. I would like you to look at wineries. Wineries are the things that produce wine. There are going to be some confounding variables if we don't look at wineries, so this is useful to do. So for a winery to improve year over year, they can't do that by changing what soil they're building on, but they can do things that are interesting, like advertise differently and cause people to perceive their wine as better, right? And this is useful because, you know, if you are me and you're just interested in the health of the region, you don't actually care if the wine is good. You care if people have jobs, right? So what I would like you to do is group by winery and year. This is a restricted set of the very expansive tasks we set out earlier. These are categorical variables, wine, and is year a continuous variable? I don't know. That's a good thing to think about, right? Find the average score of the winery and the number of reviews. This should be changing over time. Do you all know what year-on-year change is? YOY. Very good. Okay, find that. That'll be interesting to find as well. And if I were you, I would be picking a couple wineries in Oregon and see if it looks like they're improving or not, right? My hope is when that line started dropping in 2015, that was the entry of a lot of wineries at the low end, and our top performers were actually continuing to climb. So there was an expanding population, and that's why the average was dropping. I don't know if that's true. Go find it out. You have 15 minutes. I'm going to start the timer. I keep closing the timer every time. No, I don't use Chrome. I use Firefox. Oh, no, it's going to be 12 minutes because we're late on time. No, that's 12 seconds.
Well, no one knows what it is, so this sounds great. Exactly. It's just like an LLM.
That seems like the most natural way to do it.
And it seems to be working out great for them. So why not just copy that model? Right. So that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So we have until the rest of the world finds out that China is also going to sell our product before we don't care.
It was definitely went up. I was stuffed out.
Which I think we just do by like starting a company as a non-profit.
Oh yeah, after the interview.
They gave it to me right before.
Oh.
Like 2 minutes before.
I don't know. Sam didn't get it.
Yeah, they didn't say they're like, yeah, after this interview, say
But if you're rich, that's allowed.
Is it reviews just the total amount?
It's very
Yeah, that's the total amount.
To be fair, we didn't talk about it too much.
Okay.
It was just like, that was something that was in my mind the whole interview. Because I assumed we were going to talk about it.
Yeah.
No, not Edwards. Just
He went to my high school.
Did they also say that?
He is.
How much?
And he was at like our high school, at our high school like 100 celebration. He was there too.
They said it would take them like 2 days to decide.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he's from St. Louis and went to my high school.
The hiring process.
I know.
Probably
It's
a week.
real sad.
This was what they sent.
Yeah,
Not
they're
getting a lot of good.
I sent them packages.
What if we put the good on the block?
Very nice.
But it's fine.
Yeah, we did.
What is, winery is one
I thought you were about to step on it.
No, I wasn't about
You see that?
Because I probably would just do,
It's like not
It is
inside of this can of the person's what?
who would have guessed?
Yeah.
year, summer is
I
one.
think yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
You know, my dad.
I don't think that makes you lazy. I think that makes you smart.
No, I like that.
Oh, you'd rather be lazy.
No, I'm not lazy. I thought that was
What?
I mean, I'm going back to Sarah, but that's not.
Sam Altman. He is the CEO of OpenAI, which is yeah. He's a real.
My sister sucks. She was like, yeah, it's like,
caused by your.
not much I feel.
Sam Altman.
Can we take like the meeting here by your change?
That was the last.
I can't tell you. All I know is that my,
I submitted it.
Yeah, they don't have a consistent number.
I just submitted it on Thursday, like a PDF. It's kind of like a single project.
Did you just say the oldest and the
Realizing I have not said
oldest and the lowest and the divided by the
too much.
I feel like the answer is also kind of. I kind of sound like just like an introduction. Just kind of going through like
Yeah, that's what I mean. I
oldest
think
and the lowest and then you just score. And then you just find the difference. And then you divide it.
like I did the question
Oh, gotcha.
but I didn't like do an overview about like
Oh, to do the average, you get easy.
Because
and
it's
then I did it in aspects.
Sorry,
it's taking them all.
that's the next good step. Compared to water all the way around, so.
I said I was a beginner with SQL, but like most of these questions were easy.
That's good.
The only hard one was the median. And the median one I just
Oh, nice.
Reach the point of the first step. Yeah. But now we're brainstorming about how to figure out.
I don't know.
I'm expecting this yet, after reviewing the other applicants, we decided to go that route, like, okay, I'm affected that first.
I said we just
I'm gonna set that way.
Oh, I have mine for
One way to see
I was just going through it and I don't know. Because the way it's supposed to work is actually
Actually, you know what's really funny?
and the batteries.
I was in the Sparks school at UCLA, and somebody used like law technology.
Well, originally it's
She was nervous about that one girl was faster than the entire conference and like the that's faster than the fastest like
Whatever we turn
swimmer on the men's Olympic team who was number one in the conference at the time. So, yeah, so they did this big proof that concluded that she was like the fastest swimmer. Yes, that she was faster than exactly. And it was really interesting that just swimmer and was very away. Actually, I was roommates with both of them for 2 different years, and it was really funny because I was like, could have been me. But I could have done the proof. Oh, that's what they have to say.
So I just did how many rows there are. Which is simple.
That's all that matters.
Whoa, that's really funny. I mean, it's like, it's intuitive, so it makes sense. How many is the exact same. Like, it makes sense, but it's also not the most conventional one. Yeah, so you're arranging it, you're ordering it so that you have the one right here. And you're putting in your compost portion.
Oh, I had a jet.
Nice.
Yeah. I didn't know.
I think I might take.
See, we didn't have this.
Yeah.
I had red chicken apples.
Well, I did the same already.
Oh.
I did this one. Two different firms.
I see.
So I don't have one. Since I'm looking at it.
Nah, it's fine. I don't think so.
Hypothetical. Since we're looking at it.
Yeah. And it's cute.
Well,
Hey, you were just officially on here in this class, which is that Apple is holding on to Oregon Congress. That's why.
I'm just gonna call it. It's just hard to call when it has to.
Okay, but you want like a proportion of,
Parentheses, does it mean it's almost?
I guess,
Yeah.
that's how you're.
Which is essentially the same thing.
Wait. Oh, it's not ordered by that.
That's how I was.
One. You know what? I'll delete it. That's fine.
Which is what I was talking about, like, I just wasn't.
To get the proportion. So when you sales went up by 1.1.
Audrey, you were your
It's it went up by 1.
But I wanted.
Okay, it is dinner time.
Yeah.
I understand that.
And then you're gonna get okay. Thank you. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Are you going to teach us anything? It doesn't seem like you know.
When I made these slides, I thought I was
But then on a pantry cleanup, so I was 2 weeks of just eating nothing but like, everything I got left, so I don't really have much say in what I get to eat.
I don't know. And we'll never know.
I'm not too
We'll never know what that class is going to be. But it seems like maybe not once.
It's always hard because I just get like $5. But I had 2 words last year from left stuff behind in like the shared area and I told them like their new stuff. It's really hard to focus. You know, it's been a lot of like, is this really I know, I was like, after like,
Yeah.
Not only do we know if it's right or wrong,
If I recall correctly.
Right.
and then so. Okay.
Do take a mental break. You can keep talking to each other if you want, but be at full power.
my brain, I become so overwhelmed by the goals. I love it. I just got a new pair of teenager glasses, and I got them because I'm really going to use them for the classes. Honestly, for this class and this class, I thought we were like, I'll take some photos. I was like, I get so tired. I don't know how to do that. And then as soon as I turn around, I get like a school with them. I don't know.
How are you?
This is what
Yeah, that's, I thought that was
How are you?
necessary.
I'm good. I'm gonna get it.
Nice. I love wine. You can't tell by the fact that I've never drank wine.
Oh. Yeah, we're keeping halal.
You saw the concept of it?
Yeah.
Halal, probably.
It's so funny.
So I was so interested in wine because of my lack of.
Yeah, it's like the mystery of the unknown or whatever.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I drink wine before class every day.
Yeah.
Because I never know what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say what I just forgot what it tastes like. That would be a good excuse though. Yeah. Do you have the green grape flavor? That's the best one. What's your
You
favorite?
take the green grape flavor, put on the honey like Malona bar, and she walked back to the bar.
I love both of those
Yeah,
things so much.
and then walked away.
I have a picture.
She always steals food off the plate. She would just steal a piece of bagel off my bagel when it was in toast. What number you do that? Like,
Or you can like spray some.
and I don't know how she does it. She's so quick. Like I turn on for 2 seconds, but she loves it. She also loves food off.
I do know what you're talking about. I don't know anyone who can do it, but I do know what you're talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I want to watch other cool YouTube videos.
You do the tornado and then sometimes you like the tornado and then they do it. But and then they
Also,
and it's like they have a bottle and they
bag
like
of,
and it's like perfect.
it was like, I think it was like just a bag of
Splash.
splash.
But it's like a very
And
demure
for the wrapper was like,
It's not like a root splash. It's just
So it probably tasted like something with salt or popcorn.
She made the tornado really easy.
Did you ever know about last week?
I used to.
I know.
I'm surprised you were my friend.
You already did. I genuinely have no clue. It was like a weird fruit.
Like something she knows
That I
will
didn't.
fall out.
It's my gosh.
I thought it was like an apple or something. It's almost almost like
And then that's fun. Okay, she has cooking right now. Okay.
But I think that's because she knows if I'm leaving, she doesn't get to.
Do I have to keep under?
I don't know if I have it. Yeah.
I'm gonna be so rude with you. I'm checking if Ash was there, but it might be in class.
But we're gonna be there.
Oh, that's such a good point.
All your favorite
I
people.
gotta keep doing this.
Nah,
I'll
that's
do
what
homework with you later.
that's what the rest of the classes.
I haven't done that yet either.
Every time I get home, she makes
The rest of the classes.
sits there, and I just carry her around. And as soon as I put it out,
Same you this morning. You seriously not gonna do it with me? You're just making me do it all by myself?
She loves to help.
Are you embarrassed? Are you shy?
I want to say She did this yesterday.
Just sitting there like
Oh, the books were awesome. She's not like that for so long.
That's
It's so funny. Oh, with my friend's location today. She's in this. I don't think she's actually this great, but I checked it on the class. You live in Cooper, North Carolina. Or was it? No, Jordan, is going to go with him, but then if he gets into someone else in a year, then we have to move again. So we just decided that I'll stay in Vancouver because it's more likely that we'll end up in Portland or Vancouver.
Any else? Studio?
Also, that means we're not going to sell this year. I'm excited to have like a studio. Like, I don't have a chance to. I know it's smart, but I bought one now, so just put that up and see if I'm not. But this one, laundry, it's so much work. And I'm like, I'm finally going to learn more because I'm used to like $17 dollars. Kind of get hard when I just do nothing and then not. So I'm excited to accept it and also like some of my friends want transit, so I'll have to come back and like stay back and like Plus there's no traffic going 255 ways the other way around. I'm like, it's unsubscribed, increase my there's a few things that you can unsubscribe for, so just keep blocking the emails that eventually kind of upsets me. I should have like logged in and I've never.
I did try it, so well.
But the junior graduates can MBA graduate Yeah, they're so good. I love it. It's like 46 pieces by $9, and they're like popcorn, like chips, but they taste like real buttered popcorn. And it's so fucking good. It's my favorite, like, just like snack to have. Because you literally pack the bag, and it's like,
Just because I'm not.
I think there's only 2 servings.
But it's just really tight.
46 pieces.
So maybe for the
It's like I try to eat Cheez-Its and I like 7 pieces. And it's not like I will say though, it's really easy to stick to like not eating my healthy when I'm just kind of eating all the leftovers. Because all I have is like frozen meats and like rice packets. I'm like running on my last string of like frozen broccoli. That's my cheese. Also, if I realize just how widely it's there, so I can ask my visitors, like, oh, and I'm like, it is, but I'll eat it later. Yeah. I do all my like full like flour, sugar, rice, pasta, stuff like well, I do a lot of different pastas, not all my pastas, but from the Winco food section. Oh, it's fucking awesome. I believe that was in the studios, and he's like, what about me? And I was like, what do you want about me? Because I'm home this year. He's like, well, what if I get somewhere and they want to move there halfway through? And he's like, they're moving in the studio. He's like, you pull one over. He's like, all this stuff. And I was like, what are you doing? Yeah, like, what are you doing? I was like, you own like a shelf of Legos and a dresser. Like, I'm not sure what you're planning on bringing. Like, you can fit all of the stuff into the car in one trip. Okay? And he's like, well, we just need space. And I was like, dude, you're not living in this way. It's my place. And he's like, well, what if I do need it? I was like, I'm not paying $500 more a month on the off chance that you move there. Like, I'm not doing that. And they go, he's like, well, he's like, you have to put a month in my place then. I was like, no, I don't. I was like, no, back it off. And he was telling me that when he's in school, he's like, oh, I'll help pay rent. And I was like, pay rent in school. And he was like, where's my rent? And I was like, are you stupid? No. I was like, you do not pay out my student rent. And I was like, you either get a fucking job, which was really easy to school. Because it's like forward into the house, you would get a fucking job and help that way. Or I'm going to come pay for you because the first time together, we're going to pay off student loans anyway, and this way we don't have to pay for this. So, it's just like, it is a scam. I would try to have like something where he's like a loft, like a little studio, and then like one with like modern studio. Studio 2 beds, that makes no sense. That's not a thing. Studio. You don't do it for something like that. It's good. Oh, this is where we're looking at. Oh, yeah, you live in that. That's what you got. You guys have some. Like, I think my standards are, I don't need a great view, I just need a lot of natural light. And a level of anxiety. Yeah, I just like that incredibly natural light. Like, it's just not and that's what I still think I do. And I would love for it to be cut out, but that is the game. As an adult character. So, all of the things just like not my focus. No. Just not something that like I could touch the ceiling. It's like I don't want to start moving my phone. So like yes. That's right. Yeah, honestly, if I have the windows and the appliances, the less I can do. Actually, honestly, I kind of want to read the building because a lot of the times the buildings are really bad experience and I'm really places with like even less just like can't and they're like, yeah, it's fine. This is pretty cut. Exactly. Like if you're gonna play drugs or something, you can do whatever you want. This is fine. It's not. Efficiency.
And we don't even know how the sweater came about.
What sweater?
You were crocheting.
Oh, I haven't finished. I'm on square. Actually, how many? I'm on square like 6.
Out of 7?
60. I'll let you know when it's done.
Okay.
Maybe May.
Sam, you still won't do it.
Sorry, no.
I genuinely like.
Sorry, no.
Jeff, I would like you back. I made sure it's
My mom just made me one of those bags.
You got a problem with the group?
That's really nice.
That's not what I thought he was going to compliment first.
What, like its shape?
I don't know what
Not shallow.
Do the homework for my other classes during class. Group exercise is really
Can we, if this table broken, can we switch this table? Would that be too outlandish of a request?
I mean, is there a reason you want to switch the table?
Charger.
There you go.
Oh,
Oh, you have a charger. Never mind, I'll just steal this.
okay.
Yeah. Look, you just made this one.
Cool. I have.
No.
Danny Pack.
Oh, the photographer.
Yeah.
She does that all the time. She's such a beast too.
That's really
It's like, get back to work.
Or break, you know, if you're gonna actually break,
Yeah,
break.
so
That's what I would do.
Yeah. You're made to work. Really.
I got for her birthday yesterday. I'm on top of the world right now. I don't think my mother is. Well, I'm having a sweet.
I already know you more working with
How is Heather's survey class?
I'm enjoying it, but to be honest, I would let her teach me about brain cell and make an all for it.
Okay.
Yeah, like I don't know if I'm gonna ever go into like survey research or stuff.
Right,
But,
yeah.
Right, but when Heather talks about stats,
How is the like staff class?
that's one undergrads. I mean, I like it because I get to see more of them.
Right.
No.
Which is kind of cool. I don't know, but you don't know anybody. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, because Fisher Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just brilliant. She doesn't last a moment about the undergrads.
But before he left, I made sure to make a copy of
I don't know that. I mean, no, but probably undergrads.
Have you tried?
Yeah.
the Millennium.
It does, yeah.
Then why are they?
Like you can get some information from it. You can,
It's very systematic.
and you,
But I'm also doing research where I get to like
Nice. And then try to see back on and then
Actually, that's extra. Oh no, I rushed you.
did you succeed in turning the projector on? No. Okay. Cool.
No. Nobody needs people to do it. Oh.
I heard something on one about it. You know what I'm talking about?
you know what it is.
I don't use Rebel News, but
I'm really got sent out from Lori today. About Portland, but I also talked to my supervisor, and there's a possibility that there is going to be like very similar rates, but it's already graduated. It's just like with undergrads, that's the right. As someone who's a summer RA, it would really suck to have to do that and but as someone who has 90 residents right now, I know that I make decisions that are very comfort. So it's something that was perfect. Well, the many colleges are beautiful.
I think what you give
Like,
her 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and seeing the occupancy would be the double symbol. Yeah. That is not. It's that weird office
You can find something to do.
So they were housing are closed off because nobody takes the academic calendar. So the summer, our graduation happens after the fall first day of this.
Yes, I always.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so graduation is, our commencement is August 30th.
Oh, yes. And the last day class is August.
Yeah. So,
Also for us, I think our summer classes start before we graduate with our
yes,
Yes.
we have no break.
Yay!
Literally, we finish finals week and then we start. So,
Yeah, it'll be interesting. There will probably be a handful of us though, so we'll have to figure out something, whether it's like, we go into like extra safe rooms, right?
Yeah.
Squat.
just get a tent, you'll be fine.
Oh my god, there was that, do you remember the little room in Eaton? We had a David and Lily in that Eaton facility? Yes, in the basement, if you move the projector, in the little room. I'll just live there for 2 weeks, and then me and the assessments.
Sounds great.
Best roommate situation.
But anyway, with Salem, they just said, try and apply for it, and they'll.
33 and 35.
I don't think it would have I mean,
I'm assuming somewhere else.
my third has the RA lesson.
Yes. It has been a thing for at least 2 years.
I was in summer early in 2022, and I think that was
living room,
Right.
well, they brought summer housing
and then
back
like
when
a
I was
closet
there.
or bathroom like sink, and then there's
Yeah.
a walk and dryer.
So
They're just like one of the combo.
Yeah.
It's an apartment.
It's US. It's really just US.
It is.
So is it, but like you have, like, you know, you share a room.
Right.
But like honestly, not like specific.
If you do the single
I
option,
don't know.
That's it.
I honestly don't
Pay
know.
$1,000.
Yes.
yes.
Oh, you want privacy?
I think it's just about.
Okay, $1,000 to not sleep in the same room.
Is it worth it?
It depends on the other person who lives with.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I have right now, one person has a bedroom, each of us like, or, yeah.
And like honestly, I was looking for up here, and the
The cage is that same. But like the bed cage that goes over the bed and then has a curtain.
Yeah.
So they get like a little bit of. I've seen a lot
It
of
still
those
seems-
very well.
That's what I said, I like reps last year, roommate, and like, I mean, it's better than when other people dorm, because at least at that point, I was just stressing across.
I will say the most thing I've seen is, you have a roommate because they cook it.
I would have liked to tell you that.
We said, no, I didn't want
If
to.
I happen to see tomorrow, tomorrow's not recorded.
And then they put us in the bedroom because the
You'll
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
I just remember this press.
Success.
Yeah, that's what
Maybe. It'd be really funny if it didn't work.
What are you
Yeah, because it's like, class is at the 15th, commencement's the 30th.
But then I can
Try to
get
get like
this.
get a bunch of quantity apartments that are just scheduled them all.
I don't know why that's not like an instant thing. Like either it's like really broken and they should have backups, or it's just like they need to activate it. I feel like that.
Oh, I see.
I agree. I don't understand why I have to tap this like 4 times to get into the room. It's true.
It's like broken.
Oh,
You can see that.
Oh, no, sorry. My brain is
No. Try again.
We could start a world war.
Yes!
Did you all miss me? I'm back and badder than ever. Which is getting pretty bad at this point, right? I've been worsening year on year for a large number of years, and my precise age is the subject of intense debate among various scholars, right? So here's something that's unbelievably cool. I don't know if this like jumps out at you when you look at those 8 lines of code, but there is one that jumps out to me. And in line 6 where it says lag, that's really cool. That is not an easy for loop to write, and everything else on here is one for loop, right? Like the difference between summarize, select, mutate, those are all very, very easy, and lag is super annoying, right? So I think it's really cool that there's a built-in lag that you can just use like that. I don't know how this deals with the corner case that I was talking to some of you about, where you have scores but not a score for every year. I don't know how it does that. I know how I would deal with that mathematically. I didn't write lag. One of the problems with my brain, how I usually describe it, is the people that taught me to write code unfortunately taught me to do that before teaching me about things like libraries. So I'm unwilling to use a lag that anyone else wrote because I can write my own faster than I can look up how that one actually works for all of the corner cases I care about. Don't become like me, okay? This is a cautionary tale because all my code is slow and I have to maintain it myself. And so then it became my hobby. And then it became my whole personality. And now I write code for fun instead of like going to the movies and art museums. But I did just see Nosferatu, and it was visually impressive, and I have some concerns about how some of the themes were handled. So you can talk to me about that later. It was not as good as the 1922 version. You can quote me on that. So we're going to introduce dummy variables. Have you all heard of dummy variables before? Okay, so we're reintroducing dummy variables, and we're reintroducing them in the context of feature engineering. A dummy variable is a feature, right? It's a feature that's very easy to work with. It's like the VOS feature. So I spend a good amount of my time wishing that I had a variable that just said, this is the column or row you are interested in. Dummy variables accomplish that, right? Categorical data is, generally speaking, annoying to work with. Things like decision trees and random forests will take care of it a little bit, but I think that's for later on in the semester, so we're building up to that. We have to look out for multi-collinearity, but do we really? We're relatively unlikely to see that. And we'll see these 0 or 1 coefficient terms in our summaries if we hit that by accident. So all you have to do is make sure you don't basically somehow generate the same dummy twice. A natural way to do this, right? I teach students. Students have unique email addresses and unique student IDs, right? So if I do something to check if a student matches with something, I have to make sure I'm not matching against both student ID and email address, or I get this collinearity, right? I end up double counting people and things like that. I believe this is a typo, the 2 L's here, but I don't actually know how that word is spelled. So I'm telling you I believe it's a typo, but I don't know. This notion of zeros and ones here, in my brain, 0 and false and 1 and true are the same thing. I don't know if that's true for every programming language, but I was very surprised the other day. I was doing something in Google Sheets, which I don't often use, and I wrote an if statement, and a bunch of trues and falses had showed up, and I did not expect to see that. I was expecting to see 1s and 0s, right? There's nothing inherent about dummy variables. They require there to be true, false, 0, 1, or anything else. It's just somehow there are only 2 possibilities. That's the relevance here. It is not that it has to turn into some specific number. So don't play yourself on that. In code I write, I very frequently will use 1 and -1 because I'm going to multiply by it, right? And embedding things in multiplies is often a little bit more efficient than writing if statements, right? So I was writing something the other day where I cared about the amplitude of an effect or the magnitude of an effect, but I didn't know its direction, and I stored the direction as a categorical. So I can multiply by it. Yeah, Ryan?
Is it kind of like principal components in PCA?
Probably. What's that?
Well, you do like PCA that puts everything on an ordination because it looks at like every variable, but then it makes its own variables that are combinations of.
Oh, okay, yeah, linear combinations of other variables. I think kinda like is a good description, yes. I think these are conceptually related. I thought PCA was predominantly used for continuous variables. Did I make that up?
That sounds right.
And so I think perhaps one way to view this is that this is the categorical variant of PCA. I don't know if that's true. I'd have to think about it some more. But I did not view that relation, but I find it compelling. I'm glad. Perhaps we learned something today, but we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know, or what we do know. Here is, do you ever feel like you're surrounded by too many dummies? Right? This is often a problem. Kendall, put your hand on. This is often a problem I have where, do you know how many counties there are in Oregon? Okay, I thought there were 34, but either way, like too many, right?
36.
36. We're all wrong. We're all wrong. It's a multiple of 12, 3, 4, and 2.
Yeah.
Very interesting prime factorization there, right? It's it's 2 to the 4th times 3, right? Okay, that's not right. Okay, so no, it's 3 squared times 2 squared.
Yes.
You all do prime factorizations for fun, right? I was going to make my other class pair up in a few days and just do powers of 2 together. I think that'd be fun. And I might do that to you with prime factorizations, because that's like a useful thing. Stop nodding. I'm exaggerating for comedic effect. So I don't know what your experience has been looking at data frames, but every single data frame I ever look at, I think, why does this have so many blasted column headers, right? There's always more stuff than I can deal with. One of the other hats I wear is I do like a little bit of the cybersecurity thing. Everyone collects too much data, right? Just stop, right? And then I come into this class and I was like, hey, do you want 130,000 features, each of which is a dummy variable recognizing approximately on average 1 row? And like, yeah, you can very easily write the script that does that, and your computer will take 45 minutes to run anything, and you'll be like annoyed the whole time, right? So what's motivating this slide is I'm going to give you the tool to automatically generate dummy variables 2 slides from now. Well, actually 1 slide from now, depending on how you look at it. Don't use this all willy-nilly like, right? Every time you create a dummy variable, you should understand that it comes with a cost, and the cost is to your computer memory, which is a finite resource, and when you go over some fixed amount of it, your code slows down by a factor of 10. So think about that probabilistically, right? As soon as my data frame gets too big, it slows down by a factor of 10, and then the next time it gets twice as big, it slows down by another factor of 10. In general is how this is actually going to feel to you in practice, right? It might not feel like that on remote servers like Posit Connect, right? So as you start adding dummy variables, add very few of them. Salt to taste, right? Do not just write a for loop and turn everything into a dummy variable, right? Okay, so we're going to introduce dummy columns. What is a dummy column? Well, it's the column that contains the dummy variable representing each row, right? We can do this with the fast dummies package. I don't know that I have been persuaded that this is faster than writing your own loop over a few different things, right? So you worked with the Voss data set, you've worked with wineries year on year. You can see you can generate these dummy variables quite quickly, right? Fast Dummies has a little bit of smarts in it. It's going to pick out its dummy variables comparatively intelligently. There is a symmetrical series of functions in Python that happen at relatively high probability to pick out the dummy variables you're interested in. Humans are usually interested in things that show up a lot and are differentiated and things like that, right? So this is going to do things a little bit more intelligently than purely naive adding dummy variables at the cost of you having to include a different library in your startup. You will all remember at the beginning of class I introduced the series of libraries we were adopting. Fast Dummies was one of them, right? Do you all call them libraries or packages? Is it packages? We say packages? Okay. What does CRAN stand for? C-R-A-N. I couldn't hear you. Archive network?
I'll bring you to the log. I don't know, I got the network.
They're calling them packages here. Yeah, I think that's ground truth, right? Thank you. That makes more sense to me. What? Hey, look, it's from Willamette University, or Wirtschaft Universität Wien. Okay, right. So, here is an example where we can use the dummy columns function that we adopted from the Fast Dummies package, right? Dummy columns is the key function introduced. There could exist other functions in this package. Did I even check? No, of course not, right? I have the one I want, right? So I've denoted here that this is from the either library or package Fast Dummies, and I realized that was probably slightly more political than we needed to get into in class. I love this style of comment. I read a lot of R code, and I run a lot of R code, and I run a lot of things that are 14 lines long, and one of the lines uses a library I didn't include. And I go, ugh, curse is foiled again, and then I have to go install the library, and then I install it to the wrong version of R, and then I switch to Linux from Windows because I want to use the Linux file system. It's a bad time, right? What I really love, and I encourage you to think about this and cultivate a practice of your own, you should not necessarily do what works for me, right? I'm introducing this notational convenience here where the first time I use a function from a library, I specify which library it's from as I introduce the function, right? And so what this means is, in theory, we would say like an astute reader would go to the next slide and see dummy columns and remember, I didn't know what that was 5 minutes ago, but now that I see it is associated with the library Fast Dummies, right? Okay, so what do? We select by taster name. We break it up into dummy columns associated with the tasters. So now we have a column that represents a true-false value for each taster. Those true-false values are stored as integers. That's fine. There's only zeros and ones in these columns, right? And we see, here's some of our tasters. We got the infamous Roger Voss, subject of our first exercise today, and then we have other people, including, I really am appreciative of this last name, Pear Tree. That's just two nouns put together. That's a great last name. That would be like if my last name were Willamette Valley. That would be fun. So then we just select a narrow range of these dummy columns, and then I just looked at the head here. You can look at this however you want, right? I think I probably use head because I'm a Python programmer. Our programmers would usually put summarize there, perhaps? You use head a lot? Okay.
Yeah.
That, to me,
necessarily in this, like,
Yeah, not really in that way.
not
Yeah.
in this context. I use head more in the like exploring.
Normally we do that,
Data
like if you
definition.
took that, like that call and then assigned it to a variable, just like DS, and you do like head DS just to get.
Yeah.
Like a summary.
I perceive the use of head here. To me, that seems like a strange choice. Okay, we're okay with it?
I mean, it's unusual. I've seen it before, but it doesn't mean it's
Oh yeah, I think it's, what do I mean by it? It's like stylistic, right? So like if I were listening to a symphony and it were in like the Lorien mode, like I'm not used to hearing things like that, but it wouldn't necessarily sound wrong, but it wouldn't be a major or minor scale, right? And I'd be like, who wrote this? And they'd be like, oh, you know, Lorien from Loreland. And I'd be like, oh, that makes sense, right? So this is, I think the use of that head is like, it's a stylistic deviation from normalcy. And I didn't perceive it until I was looking at it in front of all of you. But I kind of don't like what it's doing because I only mean to show the column headers. So I think I should have just had list the columns. That would have been more interesting. And I think accomplished my objectives. Okay, so we have many and few dummies. What's the difference here? Going back and forth. We can lump by varieties. I love that it's just called lump. I don't know. I would have maybe called it clump. Maybe that's even worse. Maybe that's an onomatopoeia, right? But so we select varieties, we mutate, and so this is going to take the most popular varieties and then also add an other, right? We have other down here. It's weird looking at that screen, but it is the easiest screen to look at. Does it seem weird that I'm just like staring over there? Okay, so we've got Pinot Noir. And why do we love Pinot Noir? Because it's the best varietal in the Willamette Valley. You root for the home team, folks. Okay, so we got Pinot Noirs and we've got some others, right? Okay. Cabs, of course, famous. That's one of the big reds. Red blend is apparently pitched as a variety. That, I would argue, is the negation of varieties. But I'm not a wine snob. Okay. So I asked, because I wrote these slides before DeepSeek came out, I asked ChatGPT to tell me a little bit more about engineered categorical features. I think this got some interesting ideas that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of myself. So words or phrases in text. This is reserve. Remember when we were looking at reserve? And reserva, or the Italian variant, is much markedly different performance than reserve in English or French, I believe. That was pretty novel to me. It seems like you could clump things by, for example, decade. I have thought it would be interesting to clump things by regime, right? So I mentioned the example of South Africa in response to the King speech I shared on King Day, right? I don't know how wine point performance varied when the African National Congress came into control of South Africa, right? But I suspect there was some change to how wines were rated in that region for a variety of reasons. We don't have a great data set for assessing that, right? Something I think in wine space that I know was relatively interesting is at some point Argentine Malbecs started taking off. Malbec was considered a mixing wine for red blends in France, is my understanding. Anyways, the Argentines planted some of this stuff and tasted it directly, and I guess it was quite good. They started cleaning up at award shows and so on, right? So probably there's marked differences in performance in Argentina before and after the Malbec technology was discovered, right? And I expect there's also microclimate changes. I believe they started planting the same types of grape used in Champagne in Dover in the United Kingdom now, and I bet that's pretty interesting. And I also wonder if political change, like Brexit, will also affect the evaluation of British wines. I would expect all of those things to happen. Those are all related to time periods, right? We can do that by year. Numerical cutoff is pretty interesting. When I am picking wineries to visit in this region, I make sure they have at least one wine that scored 95 or higher in Wine Enthusiast. That's my algorithm I use. That gets you down to a pretty narrow range of very cool places to visit. And it also makes you feel like a snob. So that's two good things. Demographic variables are the subject of the ethics question on your problem set this week. So, that's just something to think about. I think Professor Katada Smalley has had many good and interesting remarks on census data, for example. Something I have heard a lot in my experience is the lack of, for example, an Arab American category on the census is very interesting. Race as socially constructed is an interesting idea. Gender as socially constructed is a very interesting idea. I renewed my passport on January 19th at like 4:30 p.m. And there were changes to the gender options available on that I had not expected to happen under who was president at that time, right? These are interesting things to look at historically, and we can model them in data sets. This is how much wine costs. Generally speaking, 0 wines cost $1,000 a bottle. We know, however, that there exist wines for which the cost is as high as $1,000 a bottle, right? So, and that's why we have things going up to $3,000 here. That's unsurprising. If you have the best wine in the world, you can probably fetch a pretty penny for it, right? I am, as some of you know, a content creator, and so I have a brand deal with Sincere Coffee Works based in South Korea. And they sent me some coffee to try, and it was a Cup of Excellence winner from Guatemala, which means that the 4 ounces of coffee they sent me was probably valued at a couple $100. So that's the most expensive coffee I've ever drank in my life, right? And it is, in fact, well over 10 times as much per dollar as the coffee I usually drink every day, right? And the same thing is true of like extremely rare and selective varietals in coffee, like the Yemeniya varietal. It's very difficult to get coffee beans out of Yemen right now. So those fetch a high price and hopefully financially support the many people, right? I think this bottle over here probably supports the aristocracy in France, and I can't really do anything about that, right? We can take a look at breaking this out into log, which is a little more interesting. This appears to me to be natural log. As a computer scientist, I've never seen a natural log before in my life. I only used log base 2. So I was very confused by this data when I looked at it, and I realized it's a natural log. What is the natural log numerically? What is it approximately? Does anyone know? I'm going to say 2.716. I don't know for sure. And that has something to do with calculus, is my understanding, which I also don't know anything about because that affects continuous data, and I'm a computer scientist, right? So I'm washing my hands of this, right? This appears to be natural log. So I'm guessing, I think that's a 4. Does that say 4? Maybe that says 6. So I'm guessing 2.7 times itself 4 times equals approximately how big one of these bins are. Does that make sense? Yeah, 2.7 is a little less than 3. 3 to the 4th is 81. I guess I do associate bottles of wine with frequently being in the $30 to $50 range, which I bet is about 2.7 to the 4th. And that makes sense that I have a bin of 4 about that size. So that matches my intuitive understanding of the wines I see in the real world. That's why I think this is natural log. Why did I go through a bunch of mental math in front of you? I've been jibber-jabbering a lot. Some of you have noticed that I talk. One of the things I've noticed is that I spent a lot of time in elementary school doing multiplication tables, and I was perceiving that time as having been wasted because now when I do multiplication, I open up Python and do it. That was a mistake. I should not have thought of it that way. Most of the multiplication I do without noticing. I'm at the grocery store and I figure out how much something costs per ounce, and I decide what chips to buy. You saw I grabbed some groceries before class today. I was making decisions using multiplication and division at the grocery store subconsciously, right? The benefit of doing those things subconsciously is every line of code we write, we incur some cognitive load cost, right? It costs us time and energy, costs us running the computer. We have to get our interactive models working. None of this stuff is trivial, right? So everything we can recognize without running a line of code is going to empower our understanding of data. I have been practicing quite deliberately mental math for some numbers of years now. You might want to evaluate doing that yourself. I do it mostly with powers of 2, but I've started doing it with long division, which I found was very hard to estimate, so I've been practicing that as well. Here's something I can't do mentally, and I wish I could, standardizing. I think a lot about the populations of U.S. cities. I live in Portland, which is either a large or mid-sized city. I don't know. It is right on the edge, right? And it is politically interesting that it's on the edge. There are not that many cities in this part of the United States. If you go out and include Boise, it's really Seattle, and then Portland would be the only other game in town. But Portland is not that big compared to a place like Denver, Salt Lake, Kansas City. So I like to try and evaluate things like cities or like counties in Oregon, right? So Salem is also mid-sized, right, in like an interesting way. It's the second or third largest metro in this state, probably, right? On the last census? Thank you. It is so unhelpful to think there are approximately 670,000 people living in Portland and then like a pile of humans across the hills in Beaverton, which is like not a real place, right? So I really think of this, it is more helpful to think of cities in terms of standardizing their size. I grew up in a town that had about 50,000 people in it, and it felt almost identical to towns with 100,000 people in them, and completely different from towns with 150,000 people in them for like some strange ways. There's these sort of like inflection points, and they tend to occur around standard deviations. So when I'm dealing with something like population data in one nation state, within the context of a nation state, like this is very relevant, right? So I don't know how big Athens is, but to me I do know that it contains about half the population of Greece, and that's all I have to really know, right? Mean centering and scaling. I think in general, when we're comparing numbers against each other, we want to convert them into basically a numerically neutral value, right? It is very odd to me that our wines are in between 80 and 100 on the point scale, but prices go presumably all the way down to very close to 0, and they go very, very high, right? It makes much more sense when I'm trying to relate prices 2 points that I mean center and scale both the points and the price. And with the price, I also want to take the log. And we haven't actually checked if we should take the log of price yet, right? Or of points. Why do they both start with P? We should call one of them score. And we should call the other one dollars. Okay. What you really don't want to do is you want to have 2 pieces of data. So something like, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about trillion-dollar companies lately because they have really large numbers attached to them. When you have a trillion of something and you compare it to, for example, how many Fortune 500 companies there are, for example, the dollar size of the market cap of a company is going to be dramatically higher than its rank in the Fortune 500 ranking, right? So I think Apple is probably the #1 market cap company right now, probably at around $4 trillion. And so they're also Fortune 500 #1 ranked. And probably like the 500th company is like some $20 to $50 million thing, probably like somewhere around there is like Databricks, which is like a tech startup, right? That company has a rank of 500, and 500 is much closer to 1 than $50 billion is to $4 trillion, right? I somehow want to standardize these across categories, and I don't want any data analysis I do to be wildly dominated only by the market cap of a company. Same thing is true with population, same thing is true with everything else. I'd encourage you to standardize your data. I never do this, and I always regret that I didn't do it because then my data looks wrong. I always take logs, I never standardize. Right, I use logs 95% of the time, I standardize around 40% of the time. I actually just opened up my Colab notebooks and looked at them and saw how often I did this. And so these are approximate, right? But I looked at 14 or 15 notebooks and saw what I did. I do year on year a lot. I don't do quarter on quarter. Why do I do year on year? I'm a teacher. I teach on academic years, and I compare my performance year versus year. Right? That's a very easy thing for me to look at. I've never seen a polynomial transform in real life. Or if I have, I don't remember seeing it. They seem very hard to use. It seems like you almost always want to use a log. My impression is that polynomials do not occur naturally very often. Lags seem to occur all the time. A very obvious example of something that lags is essentially every single government policy will lag by some number of years because it takes time for those things to go into effect. So if you started, for example, the ACA went into effect in like some year. Does anyone know what year ACA was enacted? Was it 2009? Did I make that up? That will have some impact on life expectancy, but when will you start to see that impact? I don't know, ask the life sciences people, right? But it will not show up immediately, right? It'll show up over time. So that's something that you have to use lags for. And the same thing is true with all forms of education policy. This is the R script I use to standardize. It's called normalized for some reason. I have also used the term equalize, which apparently also means something else completely different. So we take a list, we normalize it using scale. We're going to scale the points column, you can see that here, and we're going to do it as a vector. We have to convert many of these functions, which are from outside of the tidyverse universe, back and forth in between different data types, and so that's why we have the piping involved here. So this is turning into a list, something that we process as a vector, and so on. And you can see the example here. We standardize it, and I can't do a block. I want to do visual block highlighting. I don't know how to do that in this. You'll see these all get pushed into 87, right? So we have strong clustering around some median value with our points. On average, wine's our average, right? This should not be surprising to us. It is a little bit surprising. Take a look at this. That is a $65 Oregon wine at the same score as a $14 Oregon wine, all from Willamette. So the trick is to have your vintage named Vinters and not, let's see, what's this one? Oh, NA. It's not even from a winery. There you go. I've been advocating that you all get super into writing books. This is an R bookdown document on detecting interaction effects. I want you to be able to write stuff like this. You don't have to do it. What I've noticed over time in my life is that if I figure out a way to write some code and I don't write myself a little book about how to do it, I forget about it the next week, and I will never figure it out again as long as I live. The core contribution of this slide is I haven't found a lot of three-way interactions. Here's one example. My partner is a synthetic chemist making nanomaterials. These nanomaterials are a film you place on LEDs, so like the lights in here that are in some like heinous visual spectrum that hurts our eyes, and you can put a coating of them on a nanomaterial that causes the spectrum of the light coming out of that to change without having to use a lower efficiency light bulb. So we have lights that are very efficient in the blue spectrum, and if we shine blue lights in people's eyes late at night, they can't sleep. So if you don't sleep well after class, it's because we don't have human-centered lighting. The films that are used to change the color of these lights degrade according to 3 different factors, and let's see if I can remember them. There is the temperature at which the film on the light is kept. There is the amount of current that goes through the light, and there is the humidity level. Those things are all independent. There's an ambient temperature. It is weakly correlated with humidity, and it is unrelated to where you are at on the electric grid and the wattage of the light you have selected, right? So that is the only three-way interaction I'm aware of, and it occurs in material sciences, which is notoriously complicated. This has to come up in biology. Does this come up in biology, Ryan?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have an example?
I can't think of a good one.
Okay. Predator-prey reactions are only 2 variables, right? But maybe if you throw in like habitat destruction or something.
I'm working on like a fish tank right now, and it's all I'm thinking about, but there are a bunch of like chemicals, like ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, that are part of the nitrogen cycle.
Okay.
And there are bacteria that need to like convert them from one thing to the other, and they're affected by the other.
Okay.
So like the ones that turn nitrite into nitrate are really hurt by ammonia, so you need the ammonia ones to grow first.
Okay.
So there's probably something there. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, so that makes sense. We have some solution. It contains 3 relevant chemicals. Each of the 3 chemicals is a function of the prevalence of the other 2.
Yeah.
So we have a 3-way interaction, right? There you go. Now it's time for dinner. Okay. Is that French for library? I asked a generative AI if this was French for library, and it said, yeah. The most likely thing that someone would say to that question is yes. And I was like, does that mean yes? And it's like, I don't know. I'm incapable of knowing. I always try and spend a little bit of time in every class I teach teaching students how to make things like flowcharts, which is what this is. I don't remember if I wrote this in GraphViz or something else. I want you to see how this looks in the Quarto Markdown. Oh no, VS Code's loading, I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone that doesn't love Microsoft. Microsoft is going to use up all of my precious CPU cycles for a moment here. Okay. Oh, I don't even have the search bar. Okay. Is it Mermaid? Is it GraphViz? Why is my computer so slow? It's reactivating terminals. Why is it doing that? I don't know. Okay. Please scroll. Please scroll. Oh, this might be interesting to you. I had the Math 251 Foundations of Advanced Math chat with someone just tonight. This is LaTeX. So this is one of the famous typesetting languages used for mathematics. It's quite useful here. All right. So this is a dot. So this is from the GraphViz library. Where is it? This graphic here is also the output of a code block in a Quadro Markdown document. It is the output of a dot, or GraphViz it's called. This is GraphViz code. It is an ancient open source tool. This comes from AT&T Bell Labs, people that exist before like all the modern programming languages. It was probably written in Lisp, the Lisp processing language. Create a digraph called G. This is all coloration stuff. This doesn't matter that much. I can specify that nodes are supposed to be circles or pentagons or rectangles. I give them labels. And then I can specify all of the edges between the nodes of the graph here. I don't know if this will be useful to you in your life. I have been using GraphViz a lot now to organize my thinking and thoughts. This is a very good way to explain graduation paths to 19-year-olds. This is a very easy way to explain the difference between compiled and interpreted programming languages. This is a very easy way to explain automata theory and security and authentication protocols. It's a very easy way to explain most cloud computing, microarchitecture, or what is it? Microservices architecture and design. So if you ever need to make something that looks like, where is it? This. I want you to know how I made it. I wrote a relatively small number of lines of code. I was able to change the fonts. I was able to change the shapes, and so on. What's going on here? This is the machine learning workflow. How does this work? I have a big chunk of data, wine.rds, right? I split it into a training and testing set. By convention, I train on 80% in R and 75% in Python. Why is that? Those are the default values provided by the train test split in each of those languages. I am not going to tell you that 80 or 75 is better. I don't remember what I used to do. Everyone started doing 50-50 way back in the olden days, and then we were like, we absolutely have no reason to train on only 50% of our data. I would probably train on 95% if it were up to me, right? So what are we going to do here? With the Caret library, we're going to introduce a new technique, which is we are going to take the training data, and we're going to take samples from the training data. We are going to analyze and assess, and we are going to do this more than once. So this is the core insight of the machine learning methodology. We are not just training over the data we have, but we are sampling from the data we have, hoping that it is consistent with some population data, and we are developing better models of the different distributions of possibilities of data we could view if we are in fact drawing from the population, right? There are some baked-in assumptions to this model, right? We are still assuming that the data set we have is reasonably similar to the population data, or none of this stuff would help, right? But we don't want to ever assume is that the training data is exactly representative of the population. So that's what we're going to do here. As I look at this on that screen, but not on this screen, I see that I got the color background on my GraphViz slightly wrong. See if you can see it on that monitor. See there's a slight difference there. I didn't perceive that on any of the monitors I was designing this, which means this color is wrong, because that's the background color. Okay. So, before I started teaching this class, I had heard of the Bootstrap. My impression is everyone uses the Bootstrap all the time. I've been wrong before. I have used Monte Carlo cross-validation. These are all links to the feature engineering page we saw previously. We're going to begin with cross-validation. Why are we going to begin with cross-validation? It's deterministic. We're going to divide data into k chunks. We're going to train on all of them except one, and then we're going to test on the one we held in reserve. And we're going to do that iteratively across all of the combinations of chunks. This variable, we can specify this. You can do 5, you can do 1,000, you can do whatever you want. Be advised when you start putting big numbers in there, you're training on all of your data every time. So if you put a 50 in here instead of a 5, your code is going to run 10 times slower. So be careful with your numbers. With that said, what are we going to do? We're going to engineer 3 features. We're going to look at French wines. We're going to check to see if they're Cabernets. Wait. Cabernet, right? I didn't pronounce the T, but you all expect me to say the T in carrot. So it's Carré, right? We use the Carré library to find our Cabernets. We're going to mutate to take log price. We're going to drop drop the NA. What's that stand for? Not applicable? What's NA stand for? Nah. Okay, we're going to drop the nah. We're going to take just whether things are French in caps or not, right? I was a little surprised Jameson didn't standardize points here. I'm assuming he knows something I don't know. I didn't look at the data the other way. I would have standardized points. Okay, this is the create data partition. I believe this is the default value, but we shouldn't trust me. I'm going to look it up. Does anyone know? So the default train test split in R appears to be 0.5, which is what I did before I knew anything, and Ryan made fun of me for it. But the R project for statistical computing, this was designed by statistical PhDs, Ryan. What do you know that they don't?
I guess they know. Yeah.
Anyways, we're going to not do that. We're going to use 0.8. sklearn defaults to... This one defaults to 75. I think. Why is the internet... Is all of your internet slow? So they default to 75 or 25% test size. Train size is the complement of test size. 1 minus 0.25 is 0.75, right? So your mileage may vary. Okay. So one of the things I want to share on this slide as well, I do want to keep talking about typesetting. I think data communication is important. Oh, here's perhaps the more standard use of head we've seen, with head terminating something. I'm creating a working data frame called, I think I'm supposed to say that like Vino, like the, I don't know, is that like a Germanic pronunciation or something? I've lumped my top 4 countries. I've lumped my top 4 varietals. I've taken the log of price. That's 9 different engineered features. I select those, I drop NA, and I look at the head. And we can see we have log of price, points, country, and variety. Okay. This is the first time I have done this in this class where I have edited a data frame in a later cell after creating it in a previous cell. Why does that matter? I try to structure my cells so that you can run all of them non-sequentially. If you run this cell twice in a row, it will break. So I have a note here. I call this a destructive update. If you are running this in order and you go back in time, things will not work. Be advised, I confuse myself with this often, so I put a little label on the slide. You don't know what it means to make a destructive update. Play around with this and you'll see what happens with this and why it is annoying. Some of you are perhaps taking Data 503 from Professor Jed Rembold this term. Jed and I have spoken about this often. This notebooks style of writing code became very popular in the physical sciences around the time Jed started teaching. And we've had a very hard time, Jed particularly with physics, getting students to run all of their codes sequentially. And frequently, students were finding the correct answers to things in ways that they could not reproduce the process to get the results. If you execute the code in this Quarto Mart book document non-sequentially, you will get weird answers. I'm writing a note, don't do that. Or do it if you know what you're doing, right? In the slides Jameson gave to me, this was all fit onto one slide, so it was fine. I thought the font was too small and I couldn't read it. And then I noticed that I thought Jameson should use a function. So those are the changes I've made here. So in this cell, we did the feature engineering separately. We go forward, we create a function called renamer. It lowerifies everything, and it stir replaces all of the sort of breaking characters between things. So you see we now have country underscore France, all lowercase, no spaces, where previously we had all kinds of nonsense, right? We have Pinot, space, noir, capital letters. Okay, back and forth between those a bunch of times because this is the same conceptual idea. We create dummy columns, removing the columns that we are drawing our dummies from. So this is preventing us from having too many columns in our data frame. We apply the renamer function, and then we're going to select out everything that ends with other. We don't care about countries other than Italy, the United States, Spain, and France. I'm assuming they're the largest wine-producing regions. They're also relatively competitive in the olive oil game, which is maybe more my jam. Okay, so we have this data frame. We're calling it wino. How would you all say that? Wino? Vino? I'm going to call this why notter and why naughty. Okay, no, I'm not going to do that. That's silly. Okay, we create our partition, point 8, we split. We have a training set and a testing split. Okay. Here's the deal. I mentioned that I have the uncommon misfortune of having been trained as a computer scientist, which means if I ever see the same line of code twice, my head instantly explodes, and I turn into a pumpkin at the first crow? No. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Yes, that thing. Right. Rooster crow. There we go. Okay. So what I did is I wrote a function that does the training. Why I did this, I didn't want to write my code more than once. So here's what I did. I'm going to create a sort of training definition. I'm going to specify that I want to use the repeated cross-validation methodology. This is not the Monte Carlo, and this is not the Bootstrap. I'm going to do 5 cross-validations, and I'm going to repeat 3 times. So I'm going to take that, and that is going to be my training control. I'm going to use a LM, which is a linear model, and I'm going to apply it to the data frame named df. Where is df defined? df is defined in the name of the function. So we are going to take a formula, and this is going to be one of the sort of like stats model style formula that has a little tilde in it. So I'm going to provide this thing with the name of a data frame, which is going to be Vino, and I'm going to provide it with a formula, which is going to be probably something related to the log of price, right? And the reason I'm going to do this is I saw this code here many times where I have some model number X, I have price, I have training data, blah, blah, blah. I'm able to change this data frame back and forth between the training and testing set, which is very useful. So I am recommending, versus the code I have been seeing, take more time to write functions for any code you use more than once. I keep tracking down bugs where I think I write the same code twice and I didn't, right? Don't be like me, learn from my mistakes, write functions. R has wonderful function interface. I absolutely love this way of writing functions. This is something that is, I will say, strictly better than Python, and it is annoying that I can't do that in very many other languages. I can't do that in C, which I'm also teaching this term. Right? I did that thing where I was talking without breathing. Okay, so what is this? We have the training data. We train on this data. We get our model. We call it M2. Well, you know, why not? We throw M2 into our resampling method. We predict based on M2 on the testing set, TE. And what does that give us? Well, we're going to compute root, mean, square, error on each of these, and we'll see that we have 0.48 on the testing set, and we have 0.48. Oh, no, just kidding. I was truncating. That should actually round up to 0.49. So we are a little bit better on the training data set. That is unsurprising. But those are awfully close together. And the R squared is also quite close. So we should think that is useful. One of the things that the cross-validation model is doing is this dot here means I am regressing log price against everything else, right? All of the other stuff. And what is all of the other stuff? It is my 8 other engineered features, 4 countries, and 4 varietals. So what I can do is I can take that model and I can throw it into the variable importance function. And I have to specify the different scalar. This won't show up. And we can see what the predictors are of high prices. And we'll see that you want to have a high-scoring wine from Italy that is a Pinot Noir and is also from the United States. So it is difficult to be all of those things at the same time, but we'll do our best, right? This does not necessarily tell us if wines that are not Pinots or if Pinots from Italy specifically score well, right? So don't necessarily overthink this. But this is nice to see that, as I long suspected, red varietals, red blends, the things that they sell in boxes at Trader Joe's, you cannot use those to impress your family. They'll make fun of you, right? Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Ryan. You have to get them a Pinot Noir from Italy. So if you're trying to impress people, Pinot Noir from Italy. Okay. Thing to look out for here. All of this stuff on variable importance, we did this with categorical variables. This is why you need to standardize. If you have some really big variable with really big numbers, it's going to dominate. Or not dominate, it's going to be weird and nonlinear. Don't put yourself in a position where you're dealing with weird nonlinear data. If you have numerical data, standardize it. Do not play yourself. So, the way we can measure variable importance is you just take a linear model and you just look at the coefficients, right? That's all you have to do. This is what we did with Voss when we were picking out the Pinot Gris, right? That is the connection between that example and here. Scale all of this to standard error, standard deviation, whatever you call it. Coefficients are a good approximation for variable importance. There's way too many words on this slide. Someone should rewrite this slide. I might rewrite this slide. Are there too many words on this slide? Everyone say yes. Yeah. Yes. Boo. Yeah. Boo this slide. Boo this slide. Just look at the coefficients, okay? All right. So I tricked you, right? This is a lift from an actual white paper. Some of you have probably seen algorithms written before. This usually occurs in a little special box in LaTeX, the typesetting language we teased previously. So where, like, the lines are numbered, I added the numbers here myself. There's actually a link to the white paper. Is it? We're transferring data. Here it is. This is a screenshot. So I dumped this straight into the slides. Blah, blah, blah. This is recursive feature elimination. Do y'all want to read all this and talk about it? No. That's, okay. We're going to see how it works. Okay. You all might be way better at this than I am. I started running Caret on the 90K wines that were in my training data set, and after half an hour I turned it off and ran it over 1,000. Is my computer poorly optimized? I don't know. I ran it in sklearn in about 35 seconds, so maybe I'm bad at using R. What this means is that you should not assume that I did the following slides correctly. I was given code by people that should know what they're doing, and I could not get it to work. So what I do, I'm going to take a sample of 1,000 wines. 1,000 wines is going to be good enough for us to use this example. If one of you gets this to work with the full data set, please just send me your code snippet on Discord so I can see what you did and figure out what I was doing wrong. And separately, please load. Let's see. I got it to work here in Python. Okay. Using sklearn. Okay. So over here in R, I'm going to do my train test split. Remember, I'm down to 1,000 wines because I wanted my computer to not be tired and sleepy. So if you're feeling sleepy, you feel like my computer did when it was doing this, right? So that means you're in good company. Okay, so I have 1,000 wines. I break it up into 0.8, so that means I am training on 800 wines, and I am testing on 200 wines. I'm going to do 5 folds, right? So that's 5 out of the 800, which means there's going to be 160 wines left out of each of the cross-validation attempts, right? Okay, so we're splitting that up. This is Caret recursive feature elimination. So we have cross-validation. We're going to cross-validate on 2 here. We have the recursive feature elimination functions and so on. we're going to tell the recursive feature elimination to select from the training data set, not price. We want to regress onto price and look at all of these features here in this column. We're going to summarize the results and we're going to print it. And what is it going to tell us? It's going to tell us that there is relative importance of different variables. What is that? 1, 2, 3, and 9. Here they are related to their relative importance, and we'll see points is leading at the top again. US is relatively important. And then we also have Italy down here, which is, I think, probably cut off because that wouldn't be number 9. We have Pinot Noir, also very high feature importance. The 9th thing is probably like country France or something. What is this showing? Okay. I'm worried I'm not introducing it well because I feel like I've been talking about it in a scattered way. We are asking the computer to look at our 8 engineered features. That we are determining which one is a determinant of our one other engineered feature, the log of price. Our 8 engineered features are 4 countries and 4 varietals. We are asking Caret to go in and take out one of the engineered features at a time while having the strongest remaining predictor. It is going to do this and is going to figure out which of the predictors are the strongest. It's going to rank these, and it is going to say points, US, Pinot, Italy, and so on in order are important. Now this is a little bit different than the order we saw previously, and I think that has to do with just having the different type of machine learning implementation, right? It does make sense that we would see different performance for different countries under different methodologies, but we would see similar things drift towards the top. I suspect there are more US wines, so it might be more durable across different sampling regimes. And also remember, I am only working on 1,000 wines right now, so a shift in the most important country between US and Italy should not be too surprising. If we come over here to sklearn, we will see that Italy got the highest rank. Or no, what are the 3 ones we retain? We retain, this looks confusing, I don't want to think about this. Red blend is not important. Chardonnay is not important. Pinot, US, and Italy are important, right? Oh, my voice is in shambles. A question we should have when we are doing recursive feature elimination is how many, in addition to which, how many features should we eliminate? What I have here is I have the root mean squared error plotted against the number of variables. And we'll see we have different amounts of root mean square error at different variable numbers. So we have relatively low compared to the other samples when we include all of our features. But we do note that when we drop from 3 features to 2 features, we have lower root mean square error. This should be interesting to us because it should mean whatever this third variable is, it's essentially injecting garbage into our model. Right? By taking out variables, we become more and more predictive, down to just having the one here, being the closest to our performance at 9 variables. Most data, I think we mostly talk about this in sort of like the cloud computing context. A lot of data that is gathered and analyzed is just there to confuse us. And this is a way to measure that and to go to your boss and say, stop collecting that garbage data. This is too small to see, so I'm going to expand it and look at it somewhere else. Wait, can I? Can I do that? Oh, no. I thought this was an image. Wait, can I select the font? Oh, no, it's embedded. This is not an image. Okay. Here's a data pipeline. I'm sorry it's so small. Can you see that at all? Can you see it on your own screens? Okay. We want to put machine learning in context. We begin with a data frame. So this starts after the wrangling step, right? You learned wrangling in theory in a previous class. So we get data into a data frame, and then we do feature engineering. I think of feature engineering, I always say data transpose, but it's the same notion. I'm going to add columns that contain stuff I care about, right? Then I'm going to have too many features. So what am I going to do? I'm going to throw an algorithm at that problem, well, I throw an algorithm at the first problem, right? We throw dummy columns at feature engineering, then we throw recursive feature elimination at having too many features. What you're supposed to do after that is you're supposed to go talk to an expert. Who in here is an expert on wine? We'll deal with that later, right? That's the data ethics problem, right? Then what we have is a short list of features. With those short list of features, we become the experts. We look at this chart and we see which features are actually predictive after we've talked to the experts, right? That's the role we're supposed to have as data scientists. We're going to put this together and we're going to have a series of candidate models. So there's different trade-offs here, right? So if I'm looking at this, I have two candidate models. I have the 1 variable model and I have the 9 variable model. This model is more expensive to work with but has higher predictive power, but it might be overfitting. This model is cheap to work with in terms of computational cost to predict. It is less memory to maintain this data frame. It is easier to collect the data, it's easier on journalists and so on, but it has lower predictive power, right? 0.51 is quite a bit worse than 0.49, right? And from there, we will have a final production model that we'll put live on our dashboard and show to our shareholders at the company, like the C-suite executives, right? So that goes into our Tableau or Power BI or what do you all use for dashboards? Are we a Tableau people? Do you do dashboards? Yeah. Shiny, whatever. Okay. Here are our key terms from today. Let's check the time. Okay. We're going to go into a linear regression review after this. All of these terms are theoretical concepts, except for Caret, which is the specific R library and or package. Feature engineering, categorical feature, continuous feature. What is a categorical feature? Whether the critic is Roger Voss. What is a continuous feature? The price. We have dummy variables, which is a true-false variable that corresponds to a categorical feature. We have an interaction, which is usually not three-way, but we found examples in biological and material systems that were three-way interactions, right? Probably not a lot of three-way interactions in wine. I'm guessing it's just region year. I guess it could be region year varietal. That might be a three-way interaction, right? Caret is the way we use train test splits and the way we do recursive feature elimination and the way we do repeated cross-validation. We can specify how many times we cross-validate and how many folds we have. Models are the linear relations between things that we feature engineer, between columns and the thing we are trying to predict. We use resampling when we have a candidate model and we wish to see how well it generalizes to our expectations of the general behavior of the data. So if we have some data, we don't train on all of the data, we train on a subset of it and we test its accuracy and we see how well it generalizes, how well it will predict future data. This is the change from explanatory or exploratory to inferential or predictive statistics. Train and test data, we are introducing the 80-20 split, which seems to be pretty standard. And we also can measure variable importance, which is this thing right here. Not every variable is of equal value in predicting whatever it is you care about, usually price. And so we can rank our variables by relative importance and see that it is more important to know if a wine is from Italy or not than it is to know if it is from France or not. It is more important to know if a wine is a Pinot Noir than if it is a Pinot Gris in order to predict its price. All of these things are important to do because just a few minutes ago I told you that my computer melted when I tried to run it over the data frame I have. So you're going to have to make design decisions to come to strong conclusions about the data you are working with, or you're going to have to pay Google, Amazon, or Microsoft a small fortune to run everything. Does that all make sense? I want to pause here for questions. I feel like I haven't breathed for a while, and also my throat hurts because I've been yelling. How's everyone doing tonight? Can I hear it for Caret? Hip, hip, Caret. Okay. Has everyone gotten this to work? We're doing an impromptu exercise. Get this to work on your computer. See if you can do more than 1,000. Start here. I want to know if anyone can get over this. I'm going to go get some water. That's why we're doing an exercise, because my voice is going to blow out, and then I'm going to come back and do linear regression. So form your groups. I'll start like a 20-minute timer or something. try and get some sense of why I had to do 1,000 here. If you are a Python programmer, go ahead and break out sklearn and see what happens. sklearn is way slower at reading RDS data sets. It seemed to be able to do this well. I think I was doing the same thing logically. I don't know. Let's get to the bottom of this. I'm starting a timer. How does... Oh my gosh. Oh, my computer's just slow. I have too many tabs open. Cool. I'll be right back.
Not too bad.
I know, like we're reading through this, photo slides, touching off, you know.
Guys, never ends the work.
You know, that's what I Jace always wants to be class.
Yeah. For sure.
And he will always be class.
You want to be a class of what?
I like personally. I'll be in bed by now. Out.
That's what he said.
I'll be shook to my bed.
I cannot be productive. Oh, that's my problem. So setting the clock since 9, my productivity is 0. Well, that's because they don't have to go back to computers. I don't have to look at
Blood orange is my favorite citrus. Yeah.
What are these really weird?
Yeah.
Yep. That's what ChatGPT.
You're getting opinions from ChatGPT now?
This way. Well, I said, what is my favorite citrus? And it said, it didn't know. And then I told it to tell me a list of citruses. And then I said, pick a number between 1 and 7. And then it picked it out. So now my favorite citrus is what? Yeah, that's, I don't like thinking. So.
This is what's the
It's just about it actually errored for me. I don't know what this thing is. Like, what do you mean you don't know what this thing is?
and then he runs it on command.
You guys don't have one. This is what I'm saying.
Yellow 50. Stay hydrated.
Jason Cole doesn't pass out. Like, there's like a
You're far away.
Oh.
You better stop. You better stop.
I got this right here. I don't know why.
From the bar.
So I'm like, that's
And you
good.
That's a flex, but
Shit, let me hear from this. And your deadlifting was like, far as that actually Yeah,
How are we?
I ripped the skin on my finger.
What hurt you?
It depends on how many belts makes sense for that on. Usually like alternating. Usually I have more prominent like that. Because it's weaker.
don't. I'm always too embarrassed to do this. That's why
That's what I know. I know that one. I'm very familiar with that type of
I'm
thing.
be honest, I used to do it a lot. Now I only
Yeah,
do
those
like
are kind of good.
those ones I do all
What do you like? What would you like?
I'm great at
But when I did do deadlift, I think I got up to like almost 2 minutes.
No, it's not.
You're trying to get it's not.
Listen, I'm also not clear.
Yeah, that threshold of getting past like 100
I'm actually not like
DJ says I'll get closer to things. The sooner.
and then my next part of it goes way over. My next part is exactly. So I think
I'm gonna slip it.
Sorry.
Give like a backpack.
my next part max I weighed, yeah, I weighed 140 sorry,
It's not that bad.
But it was like for one rep, it was the shittiest rep ever. I could do like 175, 180. Not for like a ton. I could get like 3 or 4.
It's generally
But you didn't do all.
No, I always
You didn't do like all 9. Well, I want to get 90,000 to work. That just seems like satisfying.
thirst is big, so you just get super high numbers and it's so easy. I always laugh when people are like, oh my goodness. And I'm like,
I'm not necessarily
you can do so much exactly, like, because it's so easy for us to just shove all the way onto the bench and you're not even doing it. Like, every single time I was on the floor, for 700 pounds. And it's like, their entire weight is like here. It's like, your bench is supposed to be like, on the shoulders.
Yeah, in line 5,
Exactly.
16.
It's so good. So, yeah, so they were like, even next to me, like, for the bench. And I thought, like, if some reason you can do the bench, then yeah. I don't care. But yeah, but I can get up. Yeah, I can get up to like 600, 700 pound range if I was putting my entire weight on that. But the most I've ever done with that, actual shoulder blade, I think is around like which again for well, it's like
Which I think is something that
Yeah, when you do it correctly, you just. It's a great list for tennis. I think it's one of the exercises. But it's just actually because so many injuries in our lower back that having like strong knees and strong glutes helps with that. But also like the one where you lay down. Yeah. I do that as well, yeah. I always tell people that they do one in their late day, one exercise for like
This is a call.
that's what I need to
married at 2021.
No, that's what I'm trying to get people is like weighs 95 pounds, you know, and she's got little arms, and she's recently started and she wants to get stronger. So she's taking creatine, she's doing the protein shake, she's doing the whole thing, right? And right now we're supposed to be doing lightweight reps, higher reps, because we're in season. And so I was like, whatever you guys were doing in the off season, I was like, we're lifting 60%. Like we're cutting way down. Exactly. And so we had all these different weights laid out for the team, and she goes to do something. And I think it was goblet squats. And she grabs the 50-pound goblet squat. Like where my wrist was doing like light with hair, and I was like, Chili, you just grab the 50% of your body weight for something you have to hold in front of you. And I was like, she's like, well, I can. And I go, Shelly, grab it. I was like, because she, no, and it's so funny because she's still in that phase of lifting where she thinks like, no matter what, as long as it's better. And so she always goes to higher weight on her like range of motion just gets like shorter. And I remember watching her load up the like and she was and I was like, girl, you want to do that? I was like, what are you doing? You're turning kneecaps? Like, yeah, no, maybe, yeah. Even so, for tennis players, we do not need to have exercises because we study just work as a science.
But it's effort.
Oh shit! And so every time I got our coach, he's already 2 months. And I was telling you about what she when she pulled out, and I go, so they pick up the 15, and she was like, Joe,
I don't know how to do it.
If you don't build it like
no, right? No, exactly. Like I rarely lift like heavy to the point that I'm failing after like 1 or 2 reps. Like I don't remember the last time I've done that. I lift like moderate and then I start to fail around like set 2, rep 7. You know, like that's like, and like once you're also learning that you don't have to make 6 exercises per muscle group. Like if I'm doing a leg day, I'm just doing 2 hours just on the leg. And that's why I feel like I am doing like consistent leg workouts for maybe 45, 50 minutes. All year. Because after that, it's like you're not working. And ever since I learned that, like the progress is so much faster, but it's so much easier. It's like I can't do this in so long. Well, I think it was fun too. Like, I was yeah. Like I'm doing this for tennis, and I'm doing this for so. I definitely because like I fall and last season I stayed a lot of put on muscle and like and then now since we're like season I shed the last month and a half. And also like, you know, I just go into the touch and like I start getting you know, so I did that fast, so I saw a lot of the muscle. was like, oh, this looks great. And then I saw my legs and I was like, this is terrible. It's like my upper body right now is like so jacked to like fit, and then my lower body is just so bad. Just think it's fine. Like if I flex, you can see that. Like it's not like real. But like if I look and it's like if I'm just standing like straight on relaxed, not flexing, it's like it is. I do get it though right now. It's kind of sad.
Like when you go to campus, I try to click accept it for every single time because I'm not going to get up that. That's where I'm going from. And then it goes 404, like, southbound, yeah. And 404 is when I don't have adequate provisions. And I don't have provisions because I'm not. I'm gonna, okay.
Just double check.
You're so right.
Like, especially in like in the summer, do you think I don't know in high school I used to have this like 9 to 5 job and I was working the morning, going to my first one day, go to practice, come back, work the stuff out of my shift, and it was so fun. Yeah, it's just great. Yeah, it's almost like a job, and it's very humble, and it's like the whole day is centered around it. Like, I wouldn't have that.
Yeah, I DM.
I was sad, like, the middle school like organized.
Just like how you said, it's small.
Like we all have these practices for all lots of meetings that they're really social and stuff. And so we're not allowed to participate like in the end of all the season. And so I had to get involved. There's like a different like I would if you're up and like I know there's other like conference that are doing just some random thing.
I'm attempting to
Yeah,
I'm always trying to
I'm always trying to get attention.
I'm not very good at it. Is no longer.
I think we're the basketball happy to like basketball person now. They could only register. Like anybody can register, but they would only allow
Oh, we there is
I got to run for almost all of them, but I wasn't sure what the cutoff was for the sample size, because it was 57,200. So I just put it at 57,000.
Part of the reason why I would waste
I put it in my notes, but I'm not.
I got bored of raising my hand.
It is in my status as I'm and I updated on it.
I'm just having a good time.
Well,
I ran out.
big guess, yeah. So it's been a while. If I'm here, that means it's been a while. So
Assuming you're 40.
exactly.
I ran on all of it. Okay. I don't know. We think I might not have a record. I changed like
I'm not gonna lie, I tried to run all of it and I ended up restarting art and
So I had this for, I got refurbished and I had it.
all the way back.
I got distracted trying to read my homework. It's in the GitHub. It's not working on the page though. So. I'm not seeing I also hate with a burning I just traumatized.
Oh, I need to pick up some snacks for me.
Someone Discord me.
Dang, Discord.
It's broken.
Oh my god.
Maybe that's cute.
Wait, did that go from 1 to 2 while I was walking in?
I got a message.
You told me to send it to you.
That's true. That's on me. I can admit when I'm right. All right, students, I want to close the loop on this. The working hypothesis is as follows. It seems like there is a random forest package that I was missing in my dependencies that could have contributed to low performance here. I don't know why it would work but be slow, so I will investigate that. And then the other thing is everyone that got this to run over the full data set size was running it in RStudio. So I will, I'm not going to download RStudio. I'll try and run it in Posit Cloud. And we'll see if it works in Posit Cloud. Do we have any Posit Cloud appreciators in here? Very interesting. Oh, it's Jace.
Yeah.
Classic Jace, loving things in a browser. What a browser appreciator, right?
The thing is, he has RStudio downloaded on his computer.
Well, we all make mistakes. Okay. All right, so I will look into this more. I have learned that you can't just solve every problem in your life by taking code that someone else wrote and hand translating it into Python. And I did this by doing cryptography, which Python cannot do at all. Right, so I can admit when I'm wrong. I just haven't been wrong yet, so I don't have to admit it. Okay. It is time for the bonus slides. I'm going to talk at you about linear regression until we hit our credit hour expectations. Some of you have real or perceived sicknesses and have left already. That's fine. It is important, I think, especially for me, right? As you know, I am an operative from big computer science, sent into the data science classrooms to trick you all into writing high-performance code by downloading all of the packages you need, right? My statistician colleagues remind me that there's actual math going on under the hood here, and I should think about it and maybe even know what it does. I have a lot of appreciation for linear regressions because one of the things I do a lot as a computer scientist is figure out the determinants of costs of programs running. This is called complexity theory. It's well documented, and people just don't do it. There was a real trend when I was going through grad school called Proof by Google, where Google was claiming that they were doing things internally on data sets larger than anyone else had, and they just wrote an algorithm, and if it worked on their servers, that meant it had good performance. This is terrible. You can't just trust Google that they're actually doing something that makes sense internally, right? And certainly you cannot trust them that if you run code on their servers, it will just make sense or just work magically, right? So people like me in the cybersecurity space and other things did start doing probabilistic and statistical measurements of some of the behaviors of different code bases. I'm not going to claim I found anything interesting, but there are definitely people that found many security bugs in this way, noticing that certain patterns of reading and writing to memory led to drastically different performance in timing data in ways that were not predicted. So that was a interface of statistics and cybersecurity that was pretty interesting. We were able to do that because of a bunch of statisticians who are people with mathematical training that worked in bureaucracies 100 years ago. That's where the field comes from. Actually set out to put down in mathematical notation the different types of observations they were creating and actually have falsifiable methods of these observations. It's also been very, very important in the health sciences, right, where I think the statistical models are quite dominant. I'm not going to tell you what confidence intervals are, right? You know what they are, but you also understand how important they are. When we just look at some data and say, oh, that looks like these things are correlated, right? We should not just only conduct a visual test, right? We should not just trust our eyes. We should have some way of measuring things that can be wrong, so we know if we are right or wrong. Statistics gives us these strong inflection points, and we do this in the process of linear regressions. This notion of costs here is a recurring thing that we hope to build up to more over this term. You remember probably 2 weeks ago now, there was the precision recall trade-off, where if we get really invested in finding out if something is fraud or not, we might be classifying a lot of things as fraudulent that are not actually fraudulent, to have a very high hit rate on declining fraudulent credit card transactions or bank transactions or something, right? There is always going to be some balance. We're never going to have perfect models. And specifically when we use linear regressions, we have to make sure we're working with a data set for which a linear regression is an appropriate model. So we're going to go over the 5 assumptions here, and then we're going to go home. These are the 5. We need linearity. What is a counterexample of that? Price. Price was nonlinearity. Constant variance. This one is a bit weirder. I am accustomed to seeing this on midterm exam scores. I almost always have 90% of the class between 70 and 100, and 10% of the class between 20 and 40% on my midterms. I don't know if that's because I'm a bad teacher, right? Normality, we need to be drawing from something that is approximately a normal distribution. We must have imperfect multicollinearity. There's 2 L's in that again, which suggests that I spelled it correctly before. We don't want to have 2 columns that are the same thing, or proxies for each other, or somehow. And exogeneity, which I don't remember, so we're going to get there with the slides. This notion of linear combination is very interesting. Some of the students in the 3+1 in here probably had some linear algebra and looked at vectors and saw that we can construct a score or a predictor or an outcome by taking a series of input values and essentially just multiplying them by something. So we do a vector multiply. This is the way we want to be predicting our data from our observations. There's sometimes these things are very easy to predict. For example, if I know the volume of a container and the density of the contents, I can predict its weight or its mass exactly. That's not always the best assumption in real life, right? I do not think it is true that the point value of a wine or the price value of a wine either is completely predicted by its region, its varietal, and its year, right? So that is an unnecessarily strong claim. That said, we can get pretty close. The linearity here is probably the much more interesting question. Everything in real life is a log. Populations are logs, scores are logs. Always take a log if your data looks weird. You can take a square root if you want to. I don't see a lot of quadratic stuff, but that's feature engineering. Frequently we're looking at something is we're not actually looking at the piece of data itself, but we're looking at some derived value. So prices are nonlinear measures of popularity and market potential, which is why we take logs of them, because they're a proxy for some underlying value of desirability, right? And the desirability is linear even if the price is not. Can anyone say that word? Okay, so that means I don't have to say it, right? That's known as delegation. You do not want to have the case where the standard deviation is very high when the score is very high, and the standard deviation is very low when the score is very low. You want to have the same distribution of error or deviation from expectation all the way across your data set. I think this one gets cooked a lot when you do, so I mentioned like cities. So cities of certain sizes are much more similar to each other than all small towns are, right? Because there's relatively few cities, they can only occur in certain geographic areas. You have to be very careful when you start doing statistics about populations in geographic areas for this reason. But some things don't matter that much, right? So, something like income distributions, right? Well, those are actually relatively constant because different regions have different industries in them regardless of the population size of the cities, right? Look out for this, and what is the obvious way to deal with this? Just look at a residual plot, right? If there's really high residuals somewhere on your graph and not others, look out for that. In general, there should not be a linear correlation between your residuals and your predicted value. If you see that, it's bad. I've never seen anyone actually check for that, which is not good. That suggests there is wrong data out there somewhere that we should have investigated. The same thing is here with normality, which is not normalcy. Errors should not be correlated with anything. The number of times I have seen what is very obviously a parabola residual plot is quite high, and I usually see it with logs. In fact, this is going to take forever to load, but I stood here in front of you 2 weeks ago. Oh, this is slow. And I said, that's not linear, and it's not. You should always make sure that graph your residual plots, and what's the residual? It's the mean error, right? So graph all your errors. Make sure it doesn't look like there's a relationship within the errors. If there's a relationship within the errors, you need to go find that relationship and incorporate it into your model. And it's always going to be log. It's not always going to be log, it's usually going to be log. Okay. You should not have in your graph a country France, a varietal Pinot Noir, and a Pinot Noir from France column. That's bad. Double counting things, that is an exact linear combination of two other columns, right? This is usually caused by overfitting. Overfitting happens a lot in machine learning when you give a machine learning model too many columns. It is very easy to give a computer too many columns. I think there's like this famous thing called like the Netflix prize that had like 13 million columns. And I think there's like 60 million Netflix subscribers, so that's a column for every 4 people. That seems a little scuffed to me, right? Look out for that. I think that talking to some of all of you about like the Gemini ChatGPT stuff, those things are way over-engineered in a way that's quite clear, right? They always write sentences with the same syntax. Like that's just a strange thing to do, right? So look out for multicollinearity, whatever. Can any of you say that? Someone say that. Thank you. So I don't have to say it. Great. I'm not accustomed to seeing starting data scientists run into this. I think we have a principled and good rejection to over-engineering, especially this is a much bigger problem with computer scientists that like to throw for loops at everything that looks even vaguely like a problem, right? So if you start just throwing for loops, if you start doing exponential numbers of things, you've probably done something goofy. Just look out for that. Always check your coefficient matrices. So there's an algorithm here. Look at the scatter plots, blah, blah, blah. You know what to do. Model errors should be independent of the values of the errors. Look at a histogram of normality. So histogram of normality, coefficient matrices. Look at all that stuff. Make sure there's not anything crazy in there. And if you do both of those things, your histogram should look like this. And then you are allowed to go home. Hang out and talk to me if you have any questions about anything. I think it's 9:45, so hopefully that's your money's worth. Good job tonight. I'm glad some of you got the Carré model to work. I'm going to go get that debugged, and I will see you next week for K-means KNN, K-nearest neighbors. What are we doing next week? Does anyone know what we're doing next week? See you next week for K Nearest Neighbors. All right, thank you. This thing better work. Do I even have Quarto installed? Yeah, no, it's cooking.